And unfortunately, it catches on his Johnson.
If he's plank of the week, he's got a sizable plank.
That's a whole different show.
Plank of the week, Fridays at 7 on Talk.
Hi, I'm Kevin O'Sullivan, and I've got a message for you. Welcome back to this blockbuster edition of What Just Happened. It really is a good one, I think. It's so funny that people keep calling me Meghan Markle.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello and good morning to you. Happy Monday, campers. It's the start of the week, and what a... well, bit of a mixed vision out there, isn't it? Wherever you are in the country, I hope your start might be a little bit brighter than mine this morning, which of course started with TfL failing to do their job properly. We're used to that. Always the first day back at school, busy commute, and it's like, there are problems on the Underground, District Line severe delays, Jubilee Line severe delays. Why don't you just bury your face under someone's armpit for 20 minutes and pray that you'll get there on time? But it gave me plenty of time to, I don't know, build up a sense of anger with the world, just like we like to do when we get together for communal catharsis. There you go, Ted, you can knock that one off your bingo card. We've got 3 hours of chock's full of news and views and opinions and brilliant guests. I'm going to get you up to speed with everything on the front pages and beyond today, because it's a new week, it's a new news cycle, and so there's new things to moan about, and I want to invite you to join the club, because when we get together and let things off our chest, it takes the load off a little bit. And what's with mental health services so stretched in the NHS, I thought perhaps you could do with some free therapy with Auntie Alex. The number to call, and it's your normal network rate, is 0344 499 1000. You can also use that number to send me a WhatsApp message, or indeed leave me a voice note on WhatsApp, and as long as they're sane and don't have too many naughty words that we can't bleep out, I will pay them out to the nation. You can also text me 87222 if you're going to be old school about it and stick to good old-fashioned SMS. You have to write the word talk before you write the body of your text. Capital T, capital A, capital L. No, that's not right. Capital T, capital A, capital L. Yeah, it is. Capital... Oh, I can't spell. That almost made a nursery rhyme. T-A-L-K, you know what I'm trying to do. It's very Monday, isn't it? I don't know about you, but I'm feeling a little bit pooped. Right, let us begin, shall we? Because, well, if I'm a little bit pooped, do you know what's worse? the UK economy. That is beyond poop. That is Helena Hancock, charity check from the IMF. Or is it? Can Rachel Reeves fill all of these looming black holes without having to stick her hands back in our pockets? She is trying to avoid, so rumours have it, having to slam a wealth tax on the nation, what with over 10,000 millionaires leaving London this year alone. And constantly we're learning of the exodus of billionaires as well. They pay a lot into our coffers. What can she do? Where can she go to find all of the cash she needs to build the socialist dream? Let's speak now to Mark Littlewood, Director of Popular Conservatism. Good morning to you, Mark.
Hi, it's great to be with you.
It is no surprise to me that the socialist left of the Labour Party, the people who've been more suited to school politics, the sort of reverse Robin Hoodism that they seem to want to put in place, that doesn't work. We know it doesn't work from history. There are big calls now for Rachel Reeves to implement a wealth tax. But apparently, despite being pressed by backbenchers and the unions to levy a new tax on savings, investments and property portfolios of the wealthy, she's trying to resist it, which is probably a good thing, because as nice as it sounds, that those with the broadest shoulders should bear most of the weight, in reality what happens is those with the broadest shoulders just go to places where they don't have to get taxed that much.
Those with the broadest shoulders are getting pretty fed up, Alex. You just mentioned the number of millionaires leaving London. This is a disaster for Rachel Reeves and anyone who wants the money to keep pouring into the Treasury coffers. You've got to bear in mind it's the rich who pay a very disproportionate amount of tax. Sure, some of them are pretty good at handling their affairs, but generally speaking, we need many more millionaires in Britain, not many fewer, if you want to fund public services. So I think Reeves is right that a wealth tax would simply exacerbate this brain drain, this flight of capital from the UK. It would obviously be a colossal disincentive to any rich person who was thinking of relocating to the UK or perhaps opening a business in the UK. The minute you even get a smell of wealth taxes, I think you're far better to consider, I don't know, going to Singapore or the United Arab Emirates or the United States. So this won't work. I'm glad that the reports are suggesting she's going to squash it, but the problem she's got is all the pressure on her are from Labour MPs and backbenchers who want taxes to go up even further. That's all the pressure she's going to be feeling between now and the budget.
I mean, what has been proposed, and I've heard this a number of times over the past weeks, by good old Lord Kinnock, who seems to have dug himself out of from whether he's been hiding and throwing in his two-bit on a repeated basis at the moment, is that there should be a 2% tax on assets worth more than £10 million. Now, people out there will be thinking, not many people have things worth £10 million. If you've got stuff worth £10 million, 2% isn't much at all, is it? You can afford to pay that, surely. Why is it such a disastrous idea?
Well, first thing I say, it disincentivises people who are at or above that sort of level to stay in the UK or come here. There are also some big practical problems. I mean, we have a tough enough job trying to work out what everybody's income is in Britain. But imagine trying to work out exactly how much stuff everybody has. OK, you could look at the value of the property they live in, but they might have a pretty big mortgage on that. How are you going to go through things like their art collection, their wine collection, their jewellery collection, how many cars they've got? Somebody's going to have to come around from the HMRC to check off all of these things for anyone who we suspect might be worth more than £10 million. So the administration of it is a complete nightmare. And I would suggest pretty easy to avoid. Let's imagine a person who's very rich and has a lot of highly valuable paintings. Well, I imagine you just take them down off your wall and hide them away when the taxman comes around. Very easy to avoid, very difficult to administer, and sends all of the wrong signals. Tells people we don't want rich and successful people in Britain. Thanks very much. We're going to penalise you. Just the wrong message to send when the government's finances and economic growth are in an incredibly tricky spot.
I mean, this is the thing. You know, as much as we might not like it, as much as wouldn't it be lovely in the sort of sixth form politics world if everything was evenly distributed and that everyone could have comfort, because if the top 2% who are worth pay then actually there'd be no poverty in the world. Yay, that's great. It just doesn't exist like that, because when people have a lot of money, they have a lot of access. They have a lot of freedom. They have a lot of liberty to pick and choose where they go. You know, not many countries turn down somebody with billions of pounds. They'll say, yes, come on in here, make your investments here, buy the expensive houses, contribute to the economy, and we're going to tax you less than that place to make sure that where you do pay tax, it's over here. That's just the way it works. We've learned that the latest person to ship off, if you will, is a billionaire shipping tycoon from Norway, John Fredrickson, who says the UK has gone to hell, and he's put up his £250 million London mansion for sale. He is the UK's 9th richest man, or was as he's going, with £13.7 billion. But what I've learned, and I don't know if you can tell me more about this, is actually a lot of these multi-million pound properties in London are absolutely falling in value because of the flight of so much wealth from the capital. Yeah,
that's right. I gather that as well. He's put it on the market, as you say, Alex, for £250 million. I'm afraid that's a little bit out of my price range, so I won't be making a bid on it or anywhere close. It's about 500-600 times beyond my price range. But I do know one or two people who live quite near it, and they are very sceptical that he'll realise that amount of money. He might have to accept 200 million, maybe a bit less, the poor lamb. But you're quite right. You would expect the value of super rich properties to fall, because it's not just a wealth tax coming in. People start anticipating what might happen. So a good number of people are leaving the country for fear that there will be wealth taxes of some sort, or some other scheme by the Labour government to squeeze yet more money out of them. They might not know what it is. The government might not have set out what it is. It might not even come to pass. But if you have the fear that that's going to happen, well, you start, packing up, putting your properties on the market and looking for somewhere else to go. I think this chap's heading off to the United Arab Emirates, if I'm right. We should perhaps have a bit of a long, hard look at the sort of tax and spend systems of the countries that these people are fleeing to, because it's a win-win for them and a lose-lose for us.
Well, yeah, I mean, Dubai notoriously doesn't seem to charge people tax at all, so lucky them if they can afford to have that sort of policy in place. Let us talk now about Nigel Farage, because he's in all of the pages of all the newspapers today, because he's about to roll out his crime and punishment policy, or at least a glimpse of what might be to come under a reform UK government. We're a long way off from a general election, therefore manifesto pledges. But he's going to say today that violent criminals and sex offenders would never be released early if he becomes Prime Minister, that there'd be a new prison building programme to provide 30,000 new places using things like old MOD sites, that he wants to flood certain areas with things such as stop and search, potentially stopping as many as 1 in 5 people in crime hotspots, potentially even introduce curfews for teenagers where there is a lot of antisocial behaviour. And I think the most striking part of this policy is the idea as well that some of the most violent criminals he is prepared to ship off to countries who might offer their services, like El Salvador, to incarcerate them abroad instead. Now, the political opposition to this is coming from obviously the Labour Party and the Conservative Party, both who sort of echo similar sentiments, which is this is nonsense, it's not being costed, he can't do it, naysayerism basically. And he said, well, look, I'm going to show you my costing documents. They're going to come out to you today. This has been added up and is deliverable, and I'd assume he would also say something along the lines of, well, once we leave the ECHR and take back control of our own legislature, there'll be no problem in shipping off crims to places like El Salvador. Is this brave? Is this audacious? Or is this a fairy tale?
It'll be all of those things, I suppose, Alex, but I think I'm on the slightly more sympathetic to Nigel Farage end of the spectrum. I am fascinated to see the costings. If I do have a slight criticism of reform in recent weeks, there's an awful lot of what they're going to do, a good chunk of which I like the sound of, but not a huge amount of detail yet about how they're going to pay for it. So I'm going to look for those costings later today with great interest. Look, Nigel Farage is right, isn't he, that our justice system and our prison system has fallen into disrepair and disrepute. I don't think it's acting as a sufficient deterrent. I do think we need to have a long, hard look about whether we should really be sending people to prison for very short sentences of a few weeks or a couple of months. It might be we could take some pressure off the system if we essentially kept it for violent or very serious offences. Sort of, if you're going to prison, expect to be there for a good 2, 3, 4 years or much longer. That, I think, might take some pressure off the system. But he also points out, now, again, it will take, quite a bit of genius to pull this off, but there's over 10,000 foreign criminals in our prison that he would seek to deport. I'm not sure he would necessarily be able to get rid of all of them, but that would free up space as well. So the naysayers, who are right to ask for exactly how this is costed, exactly how it will work, is Nigel Farage really suggesting that when you get a sentence of 8 years, you have no chance of parole in 4, or 10 years, no chance of parole in 5? That would really put the burden on the prison system higher. But at least he's thinking out of the box. I think anyone who says, let's pretty much carry on as we have been for the last few years, is a depressing thought that we could possibly do that. Crime is a serious problem, and you sort of get the sense that our sort of social fabric is fraying at the edges as well, and undoubtedly faith in the justice system is starting to plummet. So if you don't like Nigel Farage's imaginative thinking, my message to other politicians would be come up with some pretty imaginative thinking of your own.
Right, because this is it. I do find politically what we keep hearing is it can't be done. Well, we can't stop boats because of ECHR. We can't deport foreign criminals because of no returns agreement. We can't do this because of planning regulations. We can't do this because of this, some directive here, some directive there, intransigent and uncooperative civil service, etc. And I kind of think, well, you can't just run a country by saying all of the problems we've got can't be solved because we're stuck in a Gordian knot of legislation, which has accumulated over the course of decades of supranational socialism. And now our hands are so tied that nothing that we want to do to run our country is feasible. And yet that seems to be constantly the message echoing in the rhetoric of most politicians. So perhaps it is a glimmer of sunlight at the end of the tunnel that Suella Braverman has revealed a blueprint for leaving the ECHR. It is a legal blueprint, a 56-page document. She's, of course, a former Attorney General. And it's sort of, because before we heard, well, you can't even leave the ECHR because what about the Good Friday Agreement? Oh, you can't do it. But apparently she says, well, you can do it. And this is how it could be done. Thank goodness, some might say, that people are beginning to flesh out some of these promises because, by gum, when it gets to 2029, they're going to have to deliver.
Yeah, that's right. I'm delighted that Suella's written this pamphlet in association with the Prosperity Institute think tank, who I'm very fond of. And I think she is right to highlight in the newspapers today that surely for people of a certain modicum of common sense, the question isn't should we leave the ECHR, it's how do we do it? And you can't just do it at the stroke of a pen. You're right, Alex, the Good Friday Agreement would take some nuancing. It's not beyond the wit of man if people of good faith are willing to work together to get that done. So I'm delighted she's now mapping out the blueprint for how we're actually going to leave. And you're right about this rather pessimistic sort of haze that now infects all of politics. We can't do X because of Y. We can't do A because of B. The truth is that we have tended to tie our hands in a vast number of ways over recent years, as you point out, through supranational institutions and agreements. We might have unravelled ourselves from the EU thanks to Brexit, but there's a huge amount else to unravel ourselves from if we are serious about making tough decisions. And if a new government of whatever stripe or flavour comes to power in 2029 that is serious about achieving it, it won't just have to have the ideas and the policies. It will have to have this blueprint of exactly how to do it. Which parts of the legal system, which parts of the law, which parts of our sprawling bureaucracy need to be removed or amended. Because I think if you don't do that and sort of level the playing field, you'll find that any meaningful or imaginative reforms are effectively going to be an exercise in pushing water uphill. So if you're attracted, or your viewers and listeners are attracted to this sort of agenda, they need to insist that the politicians don't just come up with those ideas, but know how to remove the roadblocks to those ideas. The Human Rights Act, the ECHR, the Equality Act, the Equality Commission, and all of the rest of it. Fortunately, we've got a few years. Well, I say fortunately. Unfortunately, we're going to have a few more years of this grim government. We've got a few years to work it out. A good start by Suella Braverman in starting to work out one piece of that jigsaw today.
Yeah, no, indeed. Do you know, I'll tell you what it feels like. It feels like every time we get a new government, it's like you haven't cleaned out your oven and you're putting more policy in to cook, and you open the oven door and all the smoke comes out and your eyes are stinging, you can't even see what you're doing. And yet they're just putting more and more and more things to sort of, you know, put on the conveyor belt of policy delivery. And I'm like, can we just stop and clean the oven first? Would that not help?
That's a very good way. That's a great way of putting it. I mean, I think really at the last election, the electorate said, well, let's see if things taste better if we get a new chef. But I think a year after that, they're starting to think we don't need a new chef, we need a whole new recipe.
You need a new kitchen, right?
A new kitchen, a new recipe, new ingredients, and a new chef. We need to do the whole enchilada. Just changing the cook has not really changed the quality of the food that we're eating. That's being gruel, isn't it, that our politicians are serving to us rather than anything nicer or more nutritious.
I wonder how far we could take this analogy from Boris's oven-ready deal to Theresa May's jam tomorrow to the thin gruel we're being served, like you said, by the Labour Party. This is sort of an analogous theme that could go on for a long time. Thank you ever so much to Mark Littlewood, Director of Popular Conservatism. Right, what are your thoughts on various things that we're talking about today? Let's rattle through some messages before we open up the world to calls. Alex, the wealth tax will end up largely on civil service and unions, as they'll be the only ones left to pay 40% tax if she touches savings or further pushes capital flight. Interesting. I do wonder with Lord Kinnock, who he and his wife, his late wife, made a lot of money working for the European Commission, and, you know, just saying. All taxpayer-funded wealth, of course. And I wonder if he has assets worth 10 million, if he manages to squeak in just below the threshold where he proposes a 2% should be paid every year by those fortunate enough to have things worth that value. Hi, Alex. Nigel Farage has put a massive smile on my face this morning. Oh, Linda from Cumbria. Yes, send all the hardened criminals to foreign prisons. Yes, he's made me happy and I have hope. I love it when you're on talk. You'll be keeping me company this morning while I do the ironing. Linda, there's a pile of ironing at my house that's left unattended. I will happily pay your train fare to come down all week, if you like, and do my ironing and my cleaning and my scrubbing and clean out my oven while you're at it. Because I must admit, of the things in life that I'm good at, I don't think domesticity is one of them. OK, right, if you want to share your thoughts with me, the number to call is 03444 499 1000. You can give that a call at any time to register your interest, and hopefully we'll give you a call back and you can be patched through to the studio, which is what we're going to be doing after the next break. So now is a perfect time for you to get in touch. If you don't want to speak to me in person because, I don't know, you're a bit tired or you can't be bothered or you don't like me, then you can always send me a WhatsApp instead, 03444 499 1000, or leave me a voice note on WhatsApp. 87222 is the number if you'd like to send me a text message. Remember to write the word talk before you text. It's all charged at your normal network rate. And we'll be speaking to some of you lot after this.
We are lifted upside down and shaken for our 170 odd quid a year for output that is appalling, nothing like it was in terms of quality 20 or 30 years ago, that literally debacle after outrage after scandal, week after week, month after month, quarter after quarter, year after year. The only way that we change this by way of the BBC becoming accountable and indeed the quality of output improving, I mean, so God help us, is that they stand on their own 2 feet and become a subscription-only service.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello there and welcome back to a bit of communal catharsis at the home of common sense. This is the moment that we get together in a sort of misanthropic kumbaya and share our thoughts and feelings and disappointments about the world we live in today. Shall we begin with a voice note? A nice little treat for me. This is Mark in Manchester.
Hi Alex, Mark from Manchester. Every time I listen to Talk, all I hear is these lot saying, oh, I'm going to look at reforms costing, and, you know, they don't seem to know what they're on about when it comes to money. Well, neither do the others. None of the other parties have got a clue. We're spending $7 billion a year on illegal immigrants who shouldn't be in the country. So whatever Nigel does is going to be better than what's happening at the moment.
I think that's one of my favourite voice notes I've listened to of all time. Do you know, you're absolutely right, Mark. It does feel like that everyone else is a naysay. Oh, it can't be done. Oh, he says this and he says that and it's all empty promises, but we can't do anything. And I'm like, hold on. You know, if I was appointed as the CEO of a failing company, right, and I came in and went, yeah, it's rubbish, innit? It's gone to the dogs. And guess what? Nothing can be done. I'd be out of a job. They'd be like, but we've appointed you to sort it out. And then you look at the Labour Party, it's like, well, it can't be like this. The Conservatives, I can't do it like that. I'm like, well, you're the problem then. You are the problem because that is what you are supposed to do. You're supposed to find the solutions. So I'm kind of with you on that one. Shall we have a call now and let's speak to, well, we're talking about a Nigel. Let's speak to another Nigel, but this is the wonderful Nigel of Oxford. Good morning to you, Nigel of Oxford.
Good morning, Alex. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you loud and clearly.
Brilliant, brilliant. I think what's not so brilliant is the state of the migrant hotel situation, and now rumours that they're being moved to brand new housing, probably on a 5-year guaranteed contract for a landlord. Actually, in this case, it sounds like the landlord is the government. And it strikes me that there are those who are homeless, struggling to get a property for themselves and for their family, living in HMOs or perhaps not the most attractive bed and breakfast and being moved around constantly, sofa surfing and everything else. And it strikes me that some of these must be motivated just to hop on a ferry across the channel, come back on an inflatable dinghy, throw away their passport, and then claim that they're from some other distant country and get themselves a brand new house or hotel accommodation guaranteed.
It is so crazy, isn't it? It's so crazy. I was reading in the newspapers the other day that there are people right now who are coming over to Britain for what they like to consider a year's holiday. They're coming over to stay in a hotel with full board, work in the black market and earn maybe 40 quid a day, which doesn't sound a lot, but when you've got no outgoings, when you've got no rent to pay, when you've got no, bills that you have to afford or food you have to buy, even given some pocket money, then 40 quid a day soon adds up to a nice little sum of savings every month, especially compared to the countries that they're from. And they'll do that for a year. And then when they finally have their application refused, they'll say, all right, we'll take the £3 grand off the government and go home. I mean, it just beggars belief. And my concern with we've got to get rid of the migrant hotels, it's costing too much money, it'll be cheaper to put them in houses, is twofold. First of all, we know we don't have enough housing stock in this country. I'm completing on a sale today. I'm buying my very first house today. Woohoo! At the age of 41. Thank you. But it's taken me, I'm 41 for crying out loud, and I've only just been able to get on the housing ladder. That's indicative of the fact we do not have enough affordable housing in this country. So when you're handing affordable housing to 150 odd 4,000 people who come in on a boat every year. And we know that to keep up with the rate of immigration alone, we've got to build about 250,000 houses a year. It's not going to work. So there's that element. But the other element is this, you know, when you see these migrant hotels, especially in places like London, and you see how many Deliveroo bikes are there, Uber Eats bikes are there, you learn about what's been going on in Epping Forest, and the men have left the hotel, and one of them has gone and, you know, caused a great amount of discomfort, to put it mildly, among women in the area. If they were doing their jobs properly in these migrant hotels, these people wouldn't be allowed out. They wouldn't be wandering around. They'd be under strict security. They would essentially be kept in detention if they've broken into the country. Of course, that doesn't happen. But we know that they're having... I've read reports of... There was a story in the papers over the weekend of a couple of people who've come into the country illegally claiming asylum, making sex videos for an online website for money. You just think this is absolutely astonishing. And yet when you then put these people, take them out of the hotel accommodation and put them into housing within our communities, there's going to be even less monitoring on what they're getting up to. You know, without sounding alarmist, how do you know if these people are working illegally, creating a pop-up brothel, setting up a cannabis farm, improvising how to make a bomb vest? I mean, it is absolutely mad. And you've got these people from massively different cultures who aren't, in theory, working, with nothing to do, just idling around within the streets where families live. And it will be, of course, the most deprived and vulnerable communities as well. It's not going to be the leafy suburbs. I just think it's a disaster. It's a disaster waiting to happen. Nigel, thank you ever so much. Let's do another voice note, shall we? This is Kelvin.
You're better off having nothing, you know, have nothing, they can't take nothing, you know, don't bother wait for anything, don't try to put the country in good stead, you know, just give up and say, do you know what, I'll live in a shed, I'll live in a tent in a field, have absolutely nothing and be happy. Oh, there you are. That's sort of, you know, it's kind of is the way forward, isn't it? If you haven't got anything, they can't tax you, can they? Let's speak now, our final call before we go to the next break, to Karen, who is in Bournemouth. Good morning to you, Karen.
Good morning, Alex. Congratulations on your new home.
Oh, wait, thank you.
I really like Nigel Farage's ideas on the prison system, but I think what he also needs to do is start also from the police system. Take policing away from universities, put law studies into the secondary curriculum, training police using the army training for like the basic training and stuff, and do it that way, because then you've got young people who are fit, who've not been totally brainwashed through the university system, and that way you can also build their careers slowly rather than rushing them up the ranks not knowing what the hell was going on.
It's interesting. Do you have a policing background yourself, Karen?
Not at all, but I've worked with children and young adults and all sorts all my life. And we tend to overcomplicate things, unfortunately.
Oh, you can say that again. I think in every single sector in life we've got legislation, regulation, unions pushing for this, that and the other, and nothing is easy anymore. We're just overloaded with bureaucracy. But before I let you go, Karen, you're in Bournemouth. I worry a bit about Bournemouth. Can I ask you something?
It's getting rough.
Yeah, so I often, when I've opened the newspapers, it always seems to me that there seem to be sex attacks going on Bournemouth Beach. I mean, is it getting lawless down there?
It seems to be getting rough. We had a phase of body parts being found for a while. But, yeah, it is getting rough. You've also got the different gangs in the hotels fighting each other. And, you know, nothing is done kind of thing. If they're going to put them in the hotels, they should be put in the hotels and they should not be allowed out, except for the hotel guardians, until their whole stuff is processed. And this idea of taking a year to process is not a load of rubbish. And, you know, if they simplify these things, you know, instead of having 60 billion different types of assault, you have one. You assault somebody with a weapon, if you sexually assault somebody, or if you assault somebody straightforward, then That's 3 types of assault, and that's all you need. All these
Right.
complications.
Keep it
about-
simple, stupid, as the old adage goes. Thank you ever so much for giving us a call there, Karen. Why are we doing this to our British seaside towns? We should have a big push about making our seaside towns great again, not just places where you put migrants in hotels. OK, talking about migrants, we're going to be continuing the story of migration after the break with Laurie Wastall, who is the associate editor of the Daily Sceptic, as a third protest is being held outside the Bell Hotel in Epping. That's coming up after this.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello and welcome back to the show. Do you know, I'm just reading an email cheekily during the advert break because someone sent me a fascinating document all about where these private properties for migrants could be set up. And someone sent me a little chart of the places where they're closed for business because they're too full, they already have too many. Places where it's getting to that point, and all the places they want to target to put people who have come into the country illegally. Makes for interesting reading, I'll tell you that much. Like, very high on the list, you've got the New Forest, you've got Wiltshire, you've got Richmond, lovely leafy Richmond, Lewis. It's all the lovely places, basically. So coming to a town and city near you. If you thought it wasn't going to reach your neighbourhood, you're probably in for a bit of a surprise. Talking about reaching your neighbourhood, I'm sure the residents of lovely Epping Forest, many people have moved there out of London, commute back in. Very lovely place indeed in Essex. I'm pretty sure that they were caught by surprise when a migrant hotel was opened in the centre of their town a few years ago. The Bell Hotel, they didn't like it back then. They tried to protest it. They were told that there'd be no more people coming to that hotel. And then in April this year, after being reassured that it was going to close down, a number more people were shipped back in. And after an accusation that one of the migrants, an Ethiopian man living in the hotel, had tried to accost a minor, a young girl in the street, and was charged with, 3 different incidents of alleged sexual assault and harassment. The people of Epping Forest have said enough is enough, and protests have been taking place outside that hotel ever since. The protests have flared up in part because people who are counter-protesting, the hard left, have got involved, trying to stir it all up and turn it all into disarray. And the Essex police have been quite strong on this, saying we will not tolerate it, and the people of Epping do have every right to be able to protest. We don't want anybody hijacking this and turning it into a riot. Let's have a little look at a clip of one mother at the Epping protest who's very concerned about the existence of a migrant hotel.
We felt a lot of the press were incorrectly reporting us on Friday morning after our protest on Thursday. And so we just wanted to make it really clear that we're strong women, we're mums, we're sisters, we're aunties, we're parents of the area. So we're just here to support. Everybody is really concerned about who is in that hotel. Crime in the area is shocking, and this is a beautiful place to live. And we are all very concerned, as are other people in other towns around the country. We need to stick together, peaceful protest, and the government need to listen to us. They need to listen to real people on the ground, people that work hard and love their country. And we're here to protect that. Our values are very important and we must protect them.
Well, she doesn't seem like a hard right nutter to me, but a very nice, ordinary woman, probably with genuine concerns. Let's speak to Laurie Wastel now, who's Associate Editor of the Daily Skeptic. Is there, Laurie, a head of steam over this, where people are sort of looking at things online or reading certain reports and beginning to sort of tar all of these asylum seekers with the same brush, when many of them are just poor, struggling souls of doing their best to better their lives and mean no harm to anybody and just want to come here and get a job and contribute? Or is there enough empirical evidence out there to say that the people of Epping Forest and other people around the country who want to protest against migrant hotels have every reason to be worried?
Yes, and I think you're quite right on the second part of that, Alex, and thanks for having me on. I think actually that's a really good point you make. I mean, people are worried in their towns and cities across the country, and often these kinds of concerns can be dismissed as anecdotal evidence or just, happening once or twice. But in fact, your caller there, Karen in Bournemouth, I mean, I think you're really right to raise that. You've got a sense that there's something going on in Bournemouth, and so has she. And in fact, the Mail on Sunday came out with an investigation yesterday about migrant crime coming from these hotels up and down the country. And I'll just read you the stats for Bournemouth, which are just extraordinary. 116 charges have been brought against 51 asylum seekers living across the 3 hotels there, I think 2 of which are right on the seafront. And so, there can be attempts to say, oh, this is just, a storm in a teacup. But I think that's absolutely not true. And people are really waking up to this now.
Blimey, 116 charges in Bournemouth alone with 51 asylum seekers. And he's look, Bournemouth's a beautiful beach. Everyone moans about climate change. We've had a lovely summer. I would like to see the big hotels in places like Bournemouth or Skegness or Scunthorpe or Blackpool or wherever it may be that have been very often, not so much Bournemouth, but other places, left dilapidated. I'd love to see those things re-gentrified and the great British seaside holiday brought back to inject money into our economy, give us a sense of pride about where we live again. And yet we're giving this accommodation for free. We're paying for it for other people to stay there who clearly are not obeying law and order. I read over the course of the weekend that 1 in 100 asylum seekers in hotels have been charged with something. And actually, to be charged with an offence, to be up in front of magistrates, is quite far down the process. Who knows how many other crimes or low-level disturbance are just not even being reported.
Well, that's another really good point you make there, Alex, because, of course, this was a Mail on Sunday investigation, and they did very well what they actually had to do was trawl through records of magistrates' courts and things and tally them up with those few defendants who had actually specified that their address was an asylum hotel. But, of course, one of the reasons they have to do this in such a painstaking way to reveal it to the public, or rather to really confirm to the public what a lot of them already knew, is that the government doesn't really keep proper track of these asylum hotels, and especially the crimes that are committed out of them. And there's a whole really culture of secrecy. I mean, of course, we've seen this with the cover-up of the rehousing of all of those Afghans that emerged last week. But another example that's really interesting, I mean, one of them who are coming in and wanting to use these hotels as somewhere to ride and be a Deliveroo rider, for instance, and make a bit of money doing that. And this is a real pull factor. And so Deliveroo, in fact, has been doing its due diligence and trying to geo-block the locations of these hotels so that people can't illegally work and make money like that, who've come over in a small boat perhaps. Now, last week it emerged that the Home Office was refusing to disclose the location of asylum hotels with Deliveroo to aid in that, and they cited safety concerns. So they're not being straight with people about the locations of these hotels, and they're not really, they're totally unwilling to get a grip on it.
Yeah, do you know, it's really difficult because you still feel, even if you're outspoken on a subject like me, you still feel like you're going to get yourself into trouble. You're going to be accused of being a xenophobe or a racist by suggesting that these people coming over on boats, breaking into the country, might not necessarily share our cultural mores or indeed want to live within the parameters of the laws of the land. Laurie, thank you ever so much. Laurie Wastel, the Associate Editor of the Daily Sceptic. I'm going to leave that interview a bit shorter than I planned because there's been a bit of breaking news, which is that the Environment Secretary, Steve Reed, has confirmed that the water regulator Ofwat will be abolished as part of an overhaul of a broken regulatory system. Now, we've all learned that water bills are probably going to go up by at least 30% over the next few years if we're going to be able to pay to patch up leaks costing us loads of money, to clean up their act because they've been polluting our rivers and our waterworks, because our infrastructure, frankly, is dated and dilapidated. And for decades now, not enough has been done by these companies. Instead, they're paying big bonuses to their bosses and profits to their shareholders and arguing that actually they should have put up prices long ago, but they didn't want to. But what we're learning now is Steve Reed is going to abolish the regulator Ofwat and no doubt replace it with something else. There's also a little suggestion here that we could end up with compulsory water meters. Oh, great. Just when you think that you can't be spied on even more. Although some might say that's fair. If you're like me, a single woman living by yourself, yeah, why should you be paying the same amount for your water as someone who lives next door in a family of 6 who have 85 showers a day? But there you go. It seems to me that the way water is done in this country is going to change. Single integrated water regulators in England and a water regulator in Wales would replace Ofwat. So there you go. There is plans afoot to change the way that these private sector companies who manage our water supply, who clearly have been messing things up for far too long now, are going to be governed. We'll try and bring you more detail on that a bit later. But when I come back after the break, we're going to be catching up with former police officer Norman Brennan and huge knife crime campaigner about Nigel Farage's revolution to crime and justice in the country. That's after this.
We are lifted upside down and shaken for our 170 odd quid a year for output that is appalling, nothing like it was in terms of quality 20 or 30 years ago, but literally debacle after outrage after scandal, week after week, month after month, quarter after quarter, year after year. The only way that we change this by way of the BBC becoming accountable and indeed the quality of output improving, I mean, so God help us, is that they stand on their own 2 feet and become a subscription-only service.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello there, welcome back to the show. Now, there's going to be a big press conference coming up at 11 o'clock as the leader of Reform UK, Nigel Farage, lays out his plans to tackle what he perceives to be growing lawlessness on the streets of the United Kingdom. He's going to pledge that violent criminals and sex offenders will never be released early, echoing concerns many of us have over the sort of spigot system that Labour have in place on our prisons, where they open it a little bit to let some people out to let off the pressure because we don't have enough places in our prison estate. And we were told it was just going to be the odd toe rag or people coming towards the end of their sentencing. But we've learnt more and more that quite violent people and people who have been accused of committing some pretty serious crimes, including sex crimes, of those who have found their incarceration terminated unduly early. He's going to promise to build new prisons to tackle overcrowding, to provide 30,000 new places. He says he can cost it. He says they've worked it all out, that they're going to use old MOD spaces. He also says Reform will send foreign offenders back to their country of origin. He's going to appoint 30,000 more police officers within 5 years, and some of the most serious offenders could be sent to El Salvador. He has also said that when it comes to shoplifters, all of them will face arrest. People carrying knives are going to be treated as serious offenders, not just slapped on the wrist and told them, OK, that's all right, just put your knives back at home, please don't do it again. He is also talking about making sure that stop and search is reintroduced, and actually flooding some areas with a lot of stop and search, where potentially 1 in 5 people could be given a shakedown. Oh, they're not going to like this, the lefty lovies, are they? But I bet I know someone who might like some of it, and that is former police officer and knife crime campaigner Norman Brennan. Good morning to you, Norman. I mean, he's definitely talking tough, especially if the opposing political parties say it can't be done, it doesn't get added up, oh, it's all pie in the sky. I think it means he's got them rattled because he's actually got some quite serious intent about properly doing things differently. So that must be music to your ears.
Well, it all sounds well and good, and good morning, Alex. I've been in policing and law and order for 47 years. How many times do you think I've heard similar promises? At this moment in time, we've got this government for a minimum, sadly, of another 4 years. By the time the next Prime Minister, which well may be Nigel Farage, comes in, his plan of a 5-year project is basically 10 years away. What we need is something to be done today. Has it been costed? Absolutely, we need up to 30,000 more police officers. We're 20,000 police officers short from the population growth from 2009. This government are telling us that we're getting 13,000 new officers. Well, we're not, Alex. What we're getting is 5,000 PCSOs, yet forces are now getting rid of their PCSOs. We're getting 5,000 special constables that work for free and only work 4 hours on average a week, and the other 3,000 are being taken away from already beleaguered police departments that are already short of officers. So basically it's all smoke and mirrors, and the people that are picking up the flack are the law-abiding public. They never see the police. Victims, they never get their crimes investigated, and the country is in absolute chaos. And I posted last night on social media and evidenced it, that Britain is in anarchy, and that should shock everybody, but I don't think it does. I think everybody has got their heads in their hands and they don't see any hope.
Yeah, no, and you know what? You make a very important point about the fact that, you know, we've still got 4 years of this Labour government, and if you're going to put these policies into effect, there's always a lag time on making sure the legislation passes, making sure the right side bit of the budget has been ring-fenced, and then, of course, seeing the eventual application and rollout before you start reaping the dividends of it. So we do feel like we're in an anarchic time. But what do you think, if you could demand the Labour government have a listen to Farage? He knows that this is clearly going to be something that resonates with people up and down the country. He knows what he's doing when he focuses on certain policies, so the Labour Party should take note and sort of shadow box him to cover the area off. And if they were going to do that, what would you be saying that they need to do right now, straight away, to begin to actually have an impact on the lawlessness in Britain?
Well, what I would do, Alex, and this would be to everybody, including Nigel Farage, and I said it the last few years, is we need 250 men and women teams that are experts in public order. They're firearm trained. We've got dog handlers there. expert investigators, and what we do is we put these 250 officers, 8 lots of them around Britain. One is sectioned in London, and we challenge every village, town and city, and these officers will be over and above what we've already got. So officers and forces where they can't already cope get a huge influx of these officers, and these officers go back time and time again until they rid those that are committing crime and carrying knives and acting antisocially. Unfortunately, we haven't got the will. They say they haven't got the money. And what we also need to do, Alex, is to get our criminal justice system to actually work. Our prisons are full to breaking point. Our criminal justice system is in absolute chaos, and all these bogus crackdowns on crime. What does it say to the public and victims of crime when they're promised crackdown after crackdown, and all they ever hear is we got too many people in prison, we're going to release them? Well, the people that are in prison are those that commit serious crime and persistent crime and have often breached all alternatives. So we've actually got the right people in prison for the right reasons, yet we're releasing them early. And what do you think they do, Alex? They go straight back on the streets and they continue to do what gave them a pretty good living before they got nicked and put away in the first place.
What about some of the policies that we're expecting Nigel Farage to announce after 11 o'clock today, such as imposing curfews in certain neighbourhoods, especially on minors under 18s who might be acting antisocially or be part of drug-stealing county lines, gangs, and also flooding certain areas with stop and search? Will that potentially help, at least as a deterrent for people who otherwise feel like they can act with impunity and terrorise our streets?
Alex, where are these police officers going to come from? We haven't got them. To carry out mass stop and search, you actually need police officers. On knife crime, which I've been speaking about, including when I was a serving police officer for 15 years, I broke from the ranks. The only police officer to ever do so. And what we need to do to tackle knife crime, and I'm almost wasting my time talking to you, Alex, with no disrespect to you, is that we need 5-year mandatory prison sentences for anyone carrying a knife on the streets without lawful authority excuse. 3 years for a child. We need mass stop and search, which we're just discussing. We need personal and parental responsibility. We need a mass education programme. We need mentors. We need to invest in community projects. We've got too many children, Alex, that have got no hope. 4,000 gangs in Britain, 200 in London, and they're between 10 and 40 strong. All of them will be having a knife because that's what they do. And what they've done is they formed families outside their own families. So when Nigel Farage is talking about home curfews, some of these parents have got absolutely no control over their children. In fact, it's the complete opposite. And I'd often describe the criminal justice system as being in intensive care. Alex, what I see now, the family are around the bed.
Yeah, no, I tend to agree, but I did say earlier on in the show that we've reached a point now in Britain where even politicians saying it can't be done, we're stuck, our hands are tied because of this, we haven't got enough money to do that, the legislation that, you know, prevents us doing this, that and the other cannot be repealed, etc. All that the British public keep hearing from all sides is everything's in a mess and the solutions cannot be found. But do you think they can be? Do you have some hope, at least, even if we are in a critical state, that if there was enough will, if there was enough imagination, if there was, you know, a sort of clamping down on a get on with it attitude rather than it's all too difficult, that things can turn around?
Sadly, for the next decade, Alex, it's going to get worse. And my predictions over the past 30 years, from my policing experience and law and order experience, 47 years, I've seen and heard it all before. And a little caveat is the will. If we actually had the will, why is it that people can enter Britain illegally? We then put them up in hotels, all expenses paid for, and as we've seen and I've seen, they commit very serious crimes. Greece have stopped, they've closed their borders and they've arrested everybody that enters their country. Why is it Britain cannot control our borders, cannot control our streets? There are no police officers on the streets to reassure and protect the public. People's crimes are not being investigated. I'd love to say there is hope, and there has to be hope, but at the moment, and for the next 5 to 10 years, I'm afraid we've got very, very turbulent times. We're in a crisis, and as I said, Britain is in anarchy, and this is from somebody that is politically homeless but cares passionately about public protection, police in the streets of Britain, and reassuring victims of crime that they are important. Sadly, they all feel as though they've just been forgotten about. And I can't disagree with that view.
No, I can't disagree with it either. Brilliantly said. Thank you ever so much for all that you do. Norman Brennan there, former police officer. It's interesting you mentioned Greece. If you arrive in Greece on a small boat, guess what? You're given a concrete floor to sleep on. You're lucky if you even have a mattress you have to share with somebody else. Normally you just have to get into fetal position, bunch up your T-shirt and use that as a pillow. And Greece has said no more. We're just not going to accept any more. They're signatories of the ECHR. They're members of the EU. So how come we're putting them up in lovely seaside hotels where they go and commit crimes? It's disgusting. It's really disgusting. OK, that's 1 hour done of catharsis. 2 more to go. We're going to come back after the break and have a look at the political polling connected to all the policies you're hearing about and see what the political landscape is looking like. Don't go anywhere. Put on the kettle. I won't go anywhere either. I am back just after this.
Good evening and welcome to Plank of the Week. It's the one show where you do not have to be worried about judgmental people because we'll do all the judging for you. Let's just have a look at how Humphrey Useless is now spending his time.
There goes your career, mate.
Over there a bit is over towards where all the migrants come in. He's jumping there. There he goes. He goes over the bar. Hello, and lady. Unfortunately, it catches on his Johnson.
If he's Plank of the Week, he's got a sizable plank.
That's a whole different show.
Plank of the Week, Fridays at 7 on Talk.
Hi, I'm Kevin O'Sullivan, and I've got a message for you. Welcome back to this blockbuster edition of What Just Happened. It really is a good one, I think. It's so funny that people keep calling me Meghan Markle, because...
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello there, welcome back to the show. Well, it's a sort of miserable start to a Monday, having to listen to all the things that the Labour Party are planning to do. And just when you thought things couldn't get worse, they just seem to get worse and worse and worse and worse and worse, don't they? Which is why we are here for you, so you can share your thoughts and your feelings on all of the day's news. Give us your views to try and chase away those blues. That is correct. And if you want some free therapy, just stay tuned for the rest of the day to Talk, because we are the home of common sense. We think like you, we speak like you, and we know, just like you, quite how bad it is out there. And keep your thoughts coming in on all of the stories. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call if you want to talk to me. We're going to do another big great guest now, but after the next break, we'll be taking your calls. So register your interest right away, would you? Alicia will pick up your call, vet you, and then hopefully take your number down and give you a call back when we are then going to be speaking to you, the great and the good of the patriotic British public. 03444991000 is the number, and it's your normal network rate. You can also use that number to send me a WhatsApp message or leave me a voice note on WhatsApp. You know how much I love a good old voice note. We'll play them out as long as they're clean. 8722 is a number if you'd like to send me a text message. And if you do that, you have to remember to write the word talk, T-A-L-K, before you write your message. Otherwise, for some reasons that are beyond my Luddite brain, they're unable to find their way into this studio. OK, let's, before we get into talking about the political landscape and polling, my brilliant producer Ted has just spotted something that the Labour Party thought that we wouldn't spot. But guess what? When you've got a bloodhound, a news dynamo like Ted sitting in the gallery, nothing misses his attention. He's like the GCHQ of bad things going on in the press, because they thought they would drown out this story of all the talk of water and Ofwat and press conferences and all the other things we might be distracted by today, just as they decide, whisper it quietly, they don't want you to know. They're going to review the state pension age. Now, apparently this is done every 6 years, where we go, oh, we're living a bit longer, aren't we? Maybe we should knock it up by a year. Oh, no, we had one of those. We had one of those less than 2 years ago, about how old we have to be before we can say, let's turn to the allotment and put our feet up because we're blimmin' knackered at this point. No, they're having a look back, aren't they? You know what that means. We're all going to be working until we're just a bag of bones. Because the state pension age, currently 66, reviewed every 6 years. The last one concluded in 2023, which, judging by my non-mathematical brain, was a year and a half ago, not 6 years ago. But giving a speech in West London, Liz Kendall, the Work and Pension Secretary, announced she's going to revive the Pension Commission to consider why future pensioners on track to be poorer than pensioners now. Well, that means she's just going to make us work forever. Tax us to the hilt and then never let us finish, never let us put our feet up, never put those lovely squishy fur-lined slipper loafers on and watch a bit of telly and think I've worked myself to the bone and finally now I get to take my weary old body to the sofa and actually enjoy some of the perks of contributing for so long. Oh, no. No. Expect that pension age to go right up. Well done, Ted, for spotting that one. Little hound that he is. He's like a truffle pig for doom. How is all of this going to affect voting? Because I was reading in the papers today that Labour's Islamophobia law, that's the one. I must admit, of all the dreadful things that this government does, that is the one that personally sends a chill down my spine in a big way. Well, apparently it could hand reform a 100-seat majority, and this is as Nigel Farage is no doubt about to stand behind some sort of lectern with a Madonna mic and wave his hands around talking about his crime and justice revolution that he promises to bring in if he were to become Prime Minister next time around. How is all of this going to affect the polling? Have reform reached peak saturation? I've heard some people say that's it, he's hit the ceiling, it's not going to go higher than this, it's all performative, and actually it's a protest vote, it will change. But I'm there thinking, well, will it? Because I meet all sorts of people in life, and I'm meeting sort of, Waitrose women, middle-class Lib Dem activists saying they're going to vote reform. The last people you would expect. But, you can't just do these things on a sample size of a couple of characters who might knock on your door during the week. You've got to get the empirical data, and a man who's made a brilliant business out of that is Conservative peer and pollster extraordinaire, Lord Robert Hayward, and he joins me now. Good morning, Robert.
Good morning, Alex. I'm not sure whether you're allowed to speak to me because you were going on about people wanting to put their feet up, etc. And since I fall into that category, you should be saying, oh, go away, put your feet up, don't do anything. You're retired, but I'm not. I'm not retired, and I have no intention of being so.
Yeah, I can tell that you moonlight for Direct Line Insurance on the side as well. For those of you listening on the radio, lovely Lord Hayward has got earpieces on and one of those microphones that comes in front of your mouth. I think he's secretly selling car insurance. Let's talk about the way that the political landscape looks, because I've heard a lot of people, I think it's wishful thinking, say that the reform boom is peaked, that actually they'll start slipping away, that, people always go back to how they used to vote. But also this extraordinary story in the Telegraph today which a poll has found out that if Angela Rayner goes ahead with creating an official definition of Islamophobia, it would hand reform a 100-seat majority. That's a survey of 2,000 people. Found that Labour polls significantly worse among voters who are told about the Islamophobia plan. I consider myself one of those. Do you think there's credence to this, that actually that particular piece of legislation could be curtains for Sir Keir Starmer?
The question comes really in two halves. One is, has reform peaked? And the other question is, will a policy on Islamophobia actually have an impact in terms of the way people vote? The indications are that at the moment that reform have slipped slightly off the top of where they were a few weeks ago, but no, they haven't necessarily peaked, because other political events may move them back up again. So you can talk about being slightly off the top, but no, you can't guarantee that any party has peaked or troughed at any particular point. In relation to Islamophobia, JL Partners have undertaken this poll. I've got an enormous amount of time for them as a polling organisation, and I've looked carefully at their figures, and there is no question that at this moment it would move the dial somewhat. The key question inevitably is whether, come a general election, this would move the dial or not. And the answer is probably not, because other things would, whether that be immigration, cost of living, the health service, etc. But the figures that they've produced are at this point.
Yeah, interestingly, because I wonder as well, because the Labour Party, I think, are probably at risk of hemorrhaging a lot of votes to the Muslim community. We hear of big beasts, people like Shabana Mahmood, who might lose her seat to a pro-Palestine candidate. West Streeting as well under threats. We saw last time round some previous Labour big beasts like Jonathan Ashworth lost his seat to people who really went after the Muslim vote. Do you think if they cover off that area that that's going to be successful?
That is clearly the objective, and that's where one has to be careful about any poll. Labour's vote at the last election was seriously overestimated. One of the big reasons it was overestimated was because polling companies could not get into particularly the Muslim community and get reliable figures. Had they done so, it would have shown up that people like Jonathan Ashworth, as you say, was going to lose his seat, West Streeting would have been in difficulties. So the polling companies do have difficulties, but that is the reason the Labour Party is currently pursuing that policy in relation to Islamophobia, because they want to re-secure that vote which they had prior to the 2024 election.
One thing that it seems to me that the Labour Party are planning to do as well, as apart from putting in certain policies which they might believe help them regain certain votes that they lost last time round, is to play with the parameters of the plebiscite. We saw this already happening in local elections where the makeup of authorities was changing, and Angela Rayner said to councils, if you don't want to hold elections, if you are going to be having a restructure, you don't have to. And of course, turkeys don't vote for Christmas, and a lot of them said, OK, we won't then. Then we've now learnt they want to put the a transferable candidate vote, whatever it's called, preferential candidate vote, into the mayoral system, where you sort of list who you want 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5, hoping, I would imagine, that that might win them some mayors when Reform has actually just won 2. And then, of course, we also learned that they're going to give votes to 16-year-olds. And I wonder, they must be doing this based upon a numerical assumption that will work in their favour. Have you crunched all of those things and figured out whether or not this would be enough to essentially create a left-wing sort of heterogeny for time immemorial, or might it even still, despite changing the nature of the franchise, might it actually help reform?
As I said earlier, you always face the difficulty in terms of answering the question that you're making, expressing a view at this particular moment, because obviously circumstances change, issues change on a monthly or 6-monthly basis, and most people, the floaters, the switchers, don't decide until the last minute. And we are also in a position now of genuine multi-party politics, the achievement of reform, possibly a Jeremy Corbyn party. We are into multi-party politics, and therefore you would get a big swing on relatively small numbers of changed votes, because would no longer be divided between 2 or 3 parties in England. It could potentially be divided between 4, 5 or 6 parties. There's no question that the decision to go for some form of alternative voting system for mayoral elections is driven by an attempt particularly to stop reform. No question in my mind that that's the idea. We had a referendum a few years ago in relation to local government elections. The population prefer first past the post systems, no question about it. And I personally, having been an MP for an area that wouldn't get a loud voice, the electorate in Bristol, because all the main centres of university and the like were in other parts of the city, I'm strongly in favour of a first past the post system, specifically to ensure that each individual community has its voice in the House of Commons.
Do you know, I've tried to sit down and figure out how the establishment, if you will, the powers that be, will stop reform, because what we've seen, I'm just taking my cues from what's gone on in other parts of the Western world, so looking at America, but especially looking at Europe, where you've had these entryist populist parties sweeping in and getting a load of votes, and various tactics being used to try and stop them in their tracks. And I was wondering, well, what are they going to do in the UK? They can't, I don't think they can go down a scandal approach with Farage. I just don't think it will sort of harness enough public opprobrium to really move the needle. I'm not sure how successful they would be with lawfare when it comes to Farage. You know, they've gone after Marine Le Pen in France via Olaf, the EU's forward office. Well, I think Nigel's had to face him down enough times in his political career that they're no longer relevant. And I kind of think back to the French snap election and what happened there, which is forming a super coalition of the left to try and block Marine Le Pen. And I figured maybe that is what the Labour Party might try to do by bringing in something like alternative votes or PR, and then saying to the SNP, to Plaid, to the Greens, to the Lib Dems, let's come up with a sort of system, a tactical system, where we might sort of decide who stands candidates where, and then form a super coalition to block reform out. What I want to ask you is, if they were to do this, if we were to move to a system where these multi-parties essentially form 2 great lumps on either side, are we as a country more right-wing or more left-wing? Would a super coalition of the left beat a super coalition of the right?
The interesting thing, there are several interesting points about Western Europe. As you know, they actually operate in general PR systems of some form or another, and they have resulted in very strong representation of the populist party, whichever country one's looking at. The other thing which people assume, and it can easily be shown to be wrong, is that people stick in voting manner on the right or on the left. There's a fair amount of evidence at the moment that people are switching between Reform and Green and the Lib Dems, or Green and Lib Dems and Reform, on the basis it's none of the above, either not Conservative or not Labour. Much to the frustration of politicians, the public at large find their own way of casting votes for the party and the policies that they want. So the electoral system may be, oh yes, that will solve our problem, we can stop X or Y. But in reality, the public actually are quite good at seeing through that and deciding to change the way they vote to the disadvantage of the people who thought of the system that would stop a party, for example, reform. And a good case in point in this is Wales.
No, very, very interesting stuff indeed. But on the whole, before I let you go, do you think, if you were to sort of take the temperature of the nation, that we're more left-wing or more right-wing?
I think at the moment we are more anti-establishment, because I'm coming to the conclusion that actually reform is not as right-wing as I thought it was going to be. Nigel Farage stands up and says, yeah, we're going to spend more money on prisons. Yes, we're going to do this in relation to two-child benefit caps. Yes, we're going to do... And every single time he says something, it costs money. And I personally want to see a sound money right-wing government, because I believe that is, in the long run, to the best of this country. But that's my personal opinion. So I hesitate to describe a party like Reform Now as right-wing, because I think it's getting very dangerously away from sound money.
Interesting points indeed. Just as we can see on the side of the screen, Sarah Poach, in their Reform's MP, is standing at a podium saying Britain is lawless at a Reform press conference where they are outlining their criminal justice policy, or giving a hint at what it might look like, including 30,000 new police officers and loads of new prison places. They said they're going to let us know how it's all costed, that their sums do add up. But is it going to be too big spend, too big state? Thank you ever so much to Lord Robert Hayward, one of my favourites, Conservative peer and pollster. We're going to be taking a short break now, but as you were invited at the top of this hour to phone in to share your thoughts on feelings on what is going on, I hope some of you have indeed registered your interest, and that we'll be picking up the phones and giving you callbacks any moment now, because coming up after the break, your thoughts, please keep them coming in. 03444 499 1000 is the number to call if you'd like to speak to me in person. You can use that number as well to send me a WhatsApp message or leave me a voice note on WhatsApp. 87222 is the number if you'd rather send me a text. I'm back after this.
Partially this is rumour, partly confirmed, that they're going to start effectively requisitioning, using Serco, local homes of multiple occupancy, and putting people in those and paying a huge amount of money to do so. So it always feels as though you're never being taken seriously. Your concerns are being ignored or worked around, and that everything is about resolving problems, not to the satisfaction of the British public, but so that they can't be seen by the British public.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Right, welcome back. We're going to cross live now to Westminster, where Reform UK's leader Nigel Farage is at the podium outlining his party's approach to law and order.
We are in a real mess. Just looking and thinking about London for today, London, 1 in 3 people at some point have been subject to phone theft. It's almost unbelievable. It's almost unbelievable. The number's so big. Had a case in my family a few months ago. Somebody at Victoria Station, a relation of mine, punched, phone taken, but they had a tracker on the phone, so we could see exactly where the phone was going. And I assume it wasn't just one phone, there would have been a couple of hundred phones. We even gave the police the address of the house in southern Buckinghamshire where the phones had gone to. The police took no action whatsoever. And you can just walk down Oxford Street, Regent Street any day, and you can see the moped gangs running amok with hardly anybody ever being arrested. Shoplifting in London. And by the way, when I give you these figures, these are the reported figures. Bear in mind that most of us now don't even bother to report crime. We can't see the point. If it comes to theft from our properties, we worry what it might do to our insurance premiums. And most people don't report stuff because what is the point? But quite extraordinary that in London alone, shoplifting should be up by 150% since 2021. Muggings in London, up 26% just in the last 2 years. But I sense, again, many people, frankly, just too embarrassed to report the fact that they have been mugged. Taxi crime is another reason why people are leaving. John Friedrichsen, the shipping magnate, he's going.
Well, there's Nigel Farage in Westminster. We've pulled out of that for the time being because the audio's gone a little bit ghoulish, hasn't it? And that's on their side, not ours, I understand. Hopefully they'll be able to sort out whatever snaggle is in a wire, because Nigel Farage there outlining the levels of criminality and basically saying, which a lot of us can agree with, that when we get the official statistics of crimes that have been reported, it's the tip of the iceberg because so many of us don't report crimes at all. And that sense that no one's going to do anything about it as well. Why bother reporting if someone's tried to nick your mobile phone? All you get if you email in is some sort of crime reference number to send to your insurance company. But it is scary. It is terrifying living in London. I was having a chit-chat with my other half this morning on text message, and he said to me, you know, even if you are not subject to harassment, to leering, to sexual assault, to theft, to mugging, the fact is, especially as a woman, because 75% of victims of things like phone thefts are women walking down the streets by themselves, you have that constant terror of thinking it is going to happen. So whether it happens or not, you have to change, you have to adapt your whole way of living. What you wear, what time of day you leave the house, where you walk, whether you have headphones in, looking in the reflections of shop windows to see if there's anybody behind you, not knowing where you're going when you get out of the tube station and trying to figure out where that restaurant is where you said you'd meet your friend, but you know you can't take out your phone and look on Google Maps because the minute you do, someone is going to try to swipe it. And laying out there quite how horrible the situation has become, and that feeling of desperation that it's changing so quickly, so rapidly, that no one's got a handle on all of this. And you kind of think, what has gone on? Is it because we've decimated the police forces? Have we cut the numbers down to the quick to such an extent that everyday law and order is no longer even provided by our protection agencies? Is it down to immigration? I think a lot of it is. What we do know, for instance, is he talked about shoplifting there in London. We know that the looting of groceries in stores up and down London is being carried out by foreign cartels. It's being done to order. It's then being sold to dodgy takeaways, or worse still, if it's luxury goods, they're being put in vans and driven across the Channel and over to countries in Eastern Europe where these criminal cartels tend to originate, because they've been using their ill-gotten gains to build massive mansions, and they want to be able to go to five-star restaurants. But guess what? They haven't got the steaks and the claret and the caviar and the foie gras to serve in those restaurants, so people are nicking it in the UK. The soft cheeses. You go into the Co-op on the thoroughfare near my house, and the meat is in a plastic box with not just a security tag but a GPS tracker. Lamb chops have a GPS tracker. That's blimmin' mental. That's mad. Like, I remember the good old days when you could just go to a butcher's. I was in Covent Garden having dinner with a friend the other day, and around the marketplace you've got these big jewellery stores. Not a single one. It was daytime as well, a nice early dinner. Not a single one had anything in the windows. Not a single watch, not a single earring, nothing. Because the criminals have become so brazen, they will ram raid a shop in broad daylight, snatch up all the loot and be gone. And we know that a lot of organised crime is being perpetrated by foreign criminals, and they're just getting away with it in broad daylight. 1 in 100 of these asylum seekers have committed serious crimes and be hauled up in front of magistrates. Again, the things that have been reported where a charge has ensued, which is the tip of the iceberg of crime and what's going on. When it becomes an official statistic, you can bet your bottom dollar that you're only getting the bit that's visible above the surface, not the huge underbelly underneath that goes unreported, uninvestigated, uncharged and unprosecuted. We will be taking a short break and then hopefully catching up with what is going on in that Reform press conference, because they're laying out their policy of how they think they can begin to turn things around. Let's read you some of the top lines of that, shall we? They want to appoint 30,000 more police officers within 5 years. They say it's fully costed. They know where they're going to get the money. We wait to hear the details. They want to create 30,000 new prison places. They like the number 30,000, don't they? With a new prison building programme to tackle overcrowding, saying that violent criminals and sex offenders will never be released early if Nigel Farage becomes Prime Minister. Says they're going to use old MOD land in which to build these massive prisons. But also they want to deport foreigners in our prisons, which account for at least 10% of the prison population. One assumes that'll be tied with doing things like leaving the ECHR. He wants to end all early release schemes for sex offenders, violent offenders, those carrying knives. All shoplifters will face arrest. All drug traffickers will be sent to jail for life. And what's more, he wants to send some of our most hardened lags over to the supermax prisons in places like El Salvador, where they certainly won't be given PlayStations, be able to smoke spice boiled kettles and pour it on the hands of the wonks or whatever they're getting up to in prisons these days. They want to deport 10,400 foreign prisoners, but also wants to go very tough on things such as stop and search, bringing it back. Not being afraid of upsetting people and saying that this will keep our streets safer if in certain communities 1 in 5 people are checked over for whether they're carrying an offensive weapon. So a lot is going to be announced today in that press conference. We're going to keep a monitor of it and let you know the details. But let's have a little break now, because so much more coming up on the show. Put the kettle on, don't go anywhere, it's getting spicy.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello there, welcome back. Well, we keep a beady eye on what Nigel Farage is announcing over in his press conference in Westminster. We're going to talk about other subjects and circle back round so you get the full fat summary with us in good time. You don't want to go anywhere else for analysis. We'll be bringing to you all of those details and ruminating on the lot of it. But before we do, let's talk now to Jake Wallace-Simons, author of Israelophobia, the newest version of The Oldest Hatred, about the situation with Palestine Action and pro-Palestine protesters and the foretold Islamophobia law that the Labour Party could introduce. Good morning to you, Jake.
Good morning.
I mean, the latest stunt we have seen was the Royal Opera House and a dance artist, a queer dance artist who attended a £48,000 a year school, stood on the stage during Verdi's opera Il Trovatore and stunned crowds when he unfurled a Palestinian flag during the curtain call. Now, this doesn't surprise me in the slightest. You know, things like the Royal Opera House are packed full of wokeatrons who probably their hearts bleed for Gaza, etc. Can't waste an opportunity to get that flag under people's noses. I can't wait to see what last night of the proms is going to look like. But I mean, this is just getting tedious now, isn't it? Is it cutting through? Oh, we can't hear Jake there for whatever reason.
Sorry,
there
can you hear me?
I can hear you now. There's our Jake. Yeah, I mean, it's just
the
latest.
the audio is going in and out a little bit. But yeah, I think I've got the gist of your question.
Yeah.
I mean, it just brings to mind a couple of years ago, there was a gay Palestinian from Hebron on the West Bank who took refuge in Israel because Israel, as we know, is the only place in the Middle East where gay people are not persecuted. It has a very big gay pride march every year. And this poor man was found in Israel, kidnapped by Palestinians, dragged back into Hebron and beheaded. That is how Palestinian culture views gay people by and large. And that's even worse in Gaza, of course, where they throw people off the tops of buildings. And yet that's the kind of context where this queer dance artist, Daniel Perry, they, them, has taken to the stage on the Royal Opera House, the peak of high culture in Britain, and has unfurled, while dressed as a demon, unfurled a Palestinian flag. It's totally myopic, it's totally narcissistic and self-centered. It's not about any real Palestinian at all. It's only about himself, his own politics and intersectionality, getting behind the flag of Palestine as a representative for climate action, for transgender action, and for all the other woke causes that cluster together under this new banner.
I mean, what we tend to have when we have foreign conflicts raging is, after a while, depending how long they go on for, the general public tends to develop a sense of ennui. They stop talking about it. They stop really caring or engaging with the topic as much as they did before. Certainly that's happening with the vile war going on in Sudan. I never hear anybody talk about that one. Ukraine and Russia barely gets a look in the news cycle anymore. And yet when I turn on the news, I'm constantly getting blow-by-blow accounts of how many hospitals have been targeted, how many aid convoys have seen people shot, how many casualties there might have been. The Hamas authorities say this, the Israeli IDF say that, and it's just absolutely relentless. And then you see this, like you said, you know, all of our arts, you've got these sort of wannabes, the intersectionals who think they're being so clever for their Instagram accounts, getting that flag out every 5 seconds. I mean, how is this making the Jewish community feel?
Well, pretty cheesed off, I think, is probably the best way of putting it. I mean, look, the thing is that it's propaganda. You know, wall-to-wall propaganda. As you said, much worse wars around the world are not covered in anywhere near the same detail, and people don't know there's a war in Sudan or Yemen or anywhere else. And we really had that hammered home last week when there was an attempted genocide just north of Israel in Syria. The Druze people were massacred, butchered, mutilated, kidnapped, abducted, men, women and children by Islamist jihadis in scenes that frankly looked like October the 7th, absolutely appalling scenes. The IDF was involved in trying to fight these jihadis off. Did anybody hear anything about that? No, we didn't, because it wasn't the Israelis doing the killing. The Israelis were actually on the side of virtue, and all the other powers in the world, from America to the EU to ourselves, didn't do anything about it, didn't talk about it, didn't really care about it, because it didn't fit the narrative of black, white, good and bad that our activists, such as the chap on stage at the moment, on your screens get aerated about. They only really want us to see the world in a black and white way, where one side is free Palestine, the other side is apartheid, awful Jews, and that's about the extent of their foreign policy analysis, I think.
Yeah, no, I have a feeling that last night at the Proms, which has got way to go before that happens, but you know that's going to be a sort of, cacophony of woke. I want to talk to you about Labour's Islamophobia law. Apparently it could hand reform a 100-seat majority, according to polling by JL Partners. That this is deeply unpopular among most of the country, I would say rightly so. Does that send a chill down your spine, that the fact that they're pressing ahead with actually criminalising criticism of the religion of Islam?
It really does. I mean, the thing is that there already are laws that prohibit hate speech and discrimination, the Equality Act and other legislation that we've got, abusing, discriminating against people, and certainly attacking them or anything like that based on their identity is already illegal. We don't need another law to create another offence of Islamophobia, placing Muslims in a separate category for special treatment, whereby everyone's got to be particularly sensitive about saying anything about their religion. People should be free to criticise any religion, whether it's Christianity or Judaism or Buddhism or Hinduism or Islam, in the same way, without being afraid they're going to be prosecuted by this law. The problem is that it's being weaponised by people with an Islamist agenda, and Labour is allowing it to happen.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, we don't need a law on Sikhophobia or Hinduphobia or Christianophobia, because by and large, we don't need to have a national conversation about the impacts of certain elements of those religions on our own social cohesion, on our own safety, on our own integration. Because by and large, when people are advocates for those religions and live in this country, they tend to sort of integrate and fit right in and uphold similar values to us. What can we do, therefore, about people from certain communities who clearly are not in lockstep with the way that we operate in the West?
Well, that's a very difficult question indeed. I think what we really need to have is a culture change, a social change in the country, whereby the norm becomes that you've got to integrate, and people who are not integrating begin to feel like they're on the outside. But I think that where it all begins is banning the Muslim Brotherhood, which is an Islamist organisation which dominates Muslim communities up and down the country. It runs the majority of the mosques are under its thumb. Most of the social institutions in Muslim communities are run by the Muslim Brotherhood in one way or another. And this is basically the wellspring of jihadism around the world. And so any Muslim who wants to stand up and call out October the 7th, for example, or who wants to integrate more, who wants to be pro-Israel or friends with Jews or whatever, is intimidated and marginalised by the Muslim Brotherhood heavies within his or her own community, making it very difficult for moderates to break away. And so we need to ban that organisation and other extremist organisations functioning in our country, giving the Muslim communities space to breathe for the moderates to come out safely and be better integrated into the mainstream. This is the work of generations, not just even one parliament.
Have we got any particular political party who's willing to do this at the moment? I've had a message from Susan today saying Labour is basically handing control of this country to the Muslim vote. It's so sinister. I'm looking to leave the country ASAP. And I get that impression as well, that it's now that politicians and political parties regard the Muslim vote as being so significant. They might not be massive in number, but they're very coordinated and organised and often do manage to get the vote out in a way perhaps the domestic community does not. That it is a powerful entity, and so you end up with a situation of the tail wagging the dog, and it doesn't seem to me anybody seems to have the guts or the guile to address that issue.
That's right. I mean, the Muslim community is between 6 and 7% of the country now, is becoming increasingly politicised and represented or militated by these Muslim Brotherhood figures. But I really I think the answer to this lies in marginalising, banning the extremists and their organisations that are functioning in the West to radicalise the Muslim community, and at the same time trying to embrace and integrate the decent, moderate Muslims who would be on our side if they had a chance to break away from the extremists in their own communities. I mean, let's not forget, many Muslims fought for this country in World War II. Muslims are not inherently anti-Semitic or inherently, against the West by, inside some kind of congenital disorder. Muslims have been decent in the past. There are many decent Muslims in Israel and decent Muslims in our country, of course, as well. So I think we must not go to either extreme of saying everything's all right, courting the vote and all the sort of stuff that we see from Labour. But also, I think we mustn't throw the baby out with the bathwater and begin to crack down on them in a way that might be objectionable and not in line with British values itself.
Very pragmatic, very sensible, as always. Jake Wallace-Simons, their author of Israelophobia, the newest version of the oldest hatred and what to do about it. She's also a columnist at The Telegraph. We're going to be taking a short break now. Reform just doing a Q&A at the end of their press conference on Law and Order. We'll be trying to pick up the top lines of what has been said in all of that. So don't go anywhere, pop the kettle on, and I'll see you on the other side of this.
Thanks, Nigel.
James, you're a complete star.
I hope I've got more than a few weeks, but...
Well, so do I.
That's really made me...
So do I. And you never know, miracles do happen.
They do. They do
happen. Well, your career's been a miracle.
Yeah. Well, it has, considering I had no A-levels, O-levels, CSEs, or even a letter after my name for broadcasting.
You said to me the other day, you've never really had a job.
I haven't.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Just when you think things can't get worse, just when you go, come on, what is the next thing that's going to happen in Britain that makes us look like a failed state? What is it going to be this time? You learn that we're probably going to face a fresh slew of doctors' strikes now, despite there being waiting lists of years, despite us having some of the worst health outcomes across developed nations, despite the fact when you phone your GP you're still faced with telephone tombola, you can barely get an appointment. Well, don't you worry, the unions are doing all right. They've been lining their pockets, haven't they? Apparently militant doctors have built up a £1 million war chest, £1 million, to bully ministers into giving them another huge pay rise. This is the BMA, the British Medical Association, says it's prepared for a long-term fight with Health Secretary Wes Streeting if talks to prevent these crippling strikes don't reach a breakthrough. It says it's got further reserves of tens of millions of pounds. If you've got all that money, why don't you just give it back to the people who gave it to you so they don't have to come to us and demand an extra 30% on top of the 30% they've already got? Can you not see we're on our knees? Ugh. Let's speak now to Roy Lilly, former NHS Trust chairman. It makes me so angry when I learn quite how muddied up these unions are and the games that they're playing. Give us more money, give us more money. If you don't, won't. We're going to terrorise you. We're going to go on strike. It's the patients that suffer, us, who actually pay into the system to pay these people, who then pay the unions to terrorise us.
OK. Good morning.
Good morning, Roy.
How are you today?
Well, I was all right until I read that. So no, I wasn't. The world was already a mess through my eyes. But this is really stuck in my craw.
You're having a wowzer today. That's good. Right. OK, the BMA has changed enormously. I mean, in my day, it was an old gentleman's club. We used to go there for lunch and have a jolly good time. And a few years ago, well, before the last strikes, actually, the junior doctors started a new organisation called Doctors Vote. Now, these were younger junior doctors who were very radical, very left-wing, and using proper constitutional means, they took over effectively the junior doctors' committees of the BMA, rather like Momentum took over the Labour Party. Quietly, cleverly, carefully, and then we had the last strikes. Everybody said at the time, doctors will never go on strike, surely. Well, actually, this lot will. And we've got the whole thing again. I mean, they settled last time for a 2-year deal. I said at the time it should be a 3-year deal because it didn't really sort out their pay. And it would have been a lot easier to have a 3-year deal. Now, here we are, they're doing it again. As far as the money is concerned, one of the problems they had last time was that the BMA don't pay strike pay. And so, you know, a lot of people lost a lot of money. And you know, these aren't all young doctors that can survive on the bank of mum and dad and fresh air. I mean, a lot of them are really quite senior and they have mortgages to pay for and kids and all the rest of it. So going on strike was you know, it cost them a lot of money. This time they prepared for that. I don't think it's true to say that they have access to the BMA's wider funds. It is true the BMA is one of the richest unions, but I don't think the Junior Doctors Committee have access to BMA funds. But I do think they have built up a war chest, so it's probably right to say that. Will there be a strike? Well, I think the good news is, Alex, that there's no news. Normally, if two parties in negotiations aren't getting on very well, there's this kind of a schmozzle in the press and everybody's, you know, calling each other idiots. This time around, it's gone very quiet, and I think that's probably a good thing. Maybe Wes Streeting is being able to pull something off. I mean, there are a whole load of things that are structurally not right as far as junior doctors and indeed nurses, for that matter, are. There's the huge cost of examinations. I mean, doctors have exam after exam after exam, and the Royal Colleges charge thousands to sit an exam. I think that's a rip-off. There are issues around little things like car parking, travel to work, rotas. I mean, rotas are very, very rigid. And of course, when junior doctors train, they get shifted around the country. And if you've got a wife and a family or a husband and a family, that can be a big upheaval as well. There's a lot structurally that we could do. As far as the money is concerned, I don't think it's going to be any. So fingers crossed, I think.
Well, there you go. You've calmed my nerves a little bit, Roy. Thank you ever so much. That's Roy Lilly, former NHS Trust Chairman. Strike pay. I mean, if you go on strike, you don't get paid. I think it'd be utterly disgusting if these doctors went on strike, which means that people might actually die as a result of missing vital prognoses or vital scans, and they can still pay themselves while doing so. That just doesn't seem right to me. So let's hope that Roy Lilly, former NHS Trust Chairman, is right, and that they don't have access to that war chest, and that no news is good news, because really I don't think we can take much more, can we? Now let's go back to the Reform UK press conference. There was a Q&A at the end of it, and Nigel Farage was asked by a member of the press about what is going on in Epping Forest, where, as we know, for days now, the locals have been protesting outside the Bell Hotel, which has been turned into a migrant hotel for a number of years, after one of the residents was up against magistrates being charged with sexual harassment of a minor. Parents obviously very concerned about the safety of particularly their daughters in that area, and had started turning out with placards protesting. Protests which are then infiltrated by the hard right. Unsurprisingly, they always pop up everywhere, don't they, and try and poke the bear in the zoo and turn things into a riot. Essex Police, by and large, I say, or credit where credit is due. They've hit back against comments that they were on the side of the left-wing protesters, quite clearly in a statement over the weekend, saying we will not tolerate this and the people of Epping have a right to protest. But when Nigel Farage was asked about this, his answer It's quite chilling. He said nobody in London understands how close we are to civil disobedience in Britain. He told journalists on Epping, I don't think anybody even understands just how close we are to civil disobedience on a vast scale in this country. And I regret saying that. Of course, there are some bad eggs that turn up at Epping. They were the usual far-right thugs. Interesting, he's aping Sir Keir Starmer's language there, but I think he's talking about the sort of hooligans who infiltrate protests for the sake of just making things worse. Do I understand how people in Epping feel? You bet your life I do. Don't underestimate the simmering anger and disgust there is in this country that we are letting in every week, some days many hundreds of undocumented young males, many of whom come from cultures in which women and young girls are not even treated as second-class citizens. So there you go. He says he gets it. At the same time, he is talking about his party's potential future policies when it comes to law and order. 30,000 new prison spaces on old MOD land, deporting 10% of the prison population who are foreign-born to the countries from whence they came. About 10,000 deportees, therefore. 30,000 new police officers. He says we're going to show you how we're going to pay for it all. He also says we're going to crack down on shoplifters, people who carry knife crimes, people carry knives, people who commit knife crimes, that serious offenders will never be let out of prison early. That if you are a drug baron, you're going to go to prison for life. He's going to make sure stop and search is conducted everywhere that needs it, even if 1 in 5 people are being patted down to see if they're carrying an offensive blade. So a lot to unpack there from that press conference, but certainly tapping into that feeling that the public just doesn't think that anything's being done about crime. He was talking about some of the statistics in London. 1 in 3 people have been mugged for their mobile phone. 1 in 3 in London. Shoplifting as well. He says you wouldn't even imagine that this was going to be the case 10 years ago. And now it just feels like we're increasingly lawless. I'm sure many of you can sympathise with that. But saying he understands the frustrations of the people of Epping Forest, and actually alluding to the fact that he thinks we are a hair's breadth away from civil disobedience in this country. I mean, we saw those riots last summer in Southport. I've spoken about it myself a lot, about how close we seem to be to everyone, just the cork flying out the top of the bottle as the bottle's continuously shaken. How much more the British people stand for, I don't know. I'm not condoning rioting. I'm not encouraging people to go out there and commit insurrection. But I do understand how upset so many people in this nation are, because I am also one of them. Sick to the back teeth. Should we do some calls now to vent some steam with some communal catharsis? And let's speak first of all to Jason, who's in the wonderful county of Wiltshire. Good morning to you, Jason.
Good morning, Alex. Thanks for taking the call. First thing I'd like to say is how gutted I am that I missed you a few months ago. You was at, can I name the pub and where it is, doing a little talk or not?
Well, if you want to, because it's gone now. It's not like the loonies with their short fringes can come and find me, because I'm here in London again.
Yeah, no, I believe you was at the Pilot in Melksham doing a...
I did a little chit-chat.
A mate of mine said you was out there, and he said, where were you? I said, I didn't know you were there. If I'd known, I would have been there and bought you a gin and tonic.
Oh, well, thank you very much, and I'd have kindly accepted as long as it was a double with slimline. I do love Wiltshire. I spend a lot of time there.
It would have been a single. Times are hard. It would have been a single.
Yeah, do you know what? That is the gutting thing, how much gin and tonic costs in this day and age. It's a great drink. In London, it's like 25 quid, and they give you a flower vase and fill it through, fill it with half the garden. Ridiculous. What happened to just a normal glass with a gin and a slimline? Done. Anyway.
Crisis. But yeah, sort of matters going on. Nigel Farage's idea with everything, sending these people to El Salvador and doing, what he wants to do. There's a little thing he might have to look at first, is getting us out of Europe properly and getting us away from the ECHR, because whilst we're under that, he's going to have no chance because of all of these lefty lawyers and everything else. I want to know how's he going to do that. That would be my sort of how's he going to do it?
It's interesting. I mean, it's funny, isn't it? Because Suella Braverman has come up with her blueprint for how we leave the ECHR today. And that blueprint, I think, is available to any particular political party who might wish to use it, even though her husband, Raoul, who had become a member of Reform, has seemingly left Reform again. Something going on there between, I think, Zia Youssef, the chairman, and having a few disagreements, let's say, with other people. But I would imagine that Nigel Farage has campaigned for a long time on having to leave the ECHR. Years ago, when it was sort of a vague idea, he was banging on about this, and other people said, we're not going to do it. Now, of course, everyone's like, we've got to leave the ECHR. I think he's recognised that to be a key step along the path to regaining full sovereignty of how we run our country for a long time now. But there's also going to need to be, I would imagine, some sort of great repeal act, because everything doesn't go to the courts in Strasbourg. Oh no, our own domestic legal system in the High Courts are bad enough, and the Supreme Court before it even gets sent up the ladder to the ECHR. Then you've got all the case precedents, our own Human Rights Act, which stems from the ECHR. All of that's going to have to be dug up and thrown into the dustbin of history. Can you imagine? Can you imagine how the world's media are going to react if we get Farage in number 10? And he says, we're getting rid of the Human Rights Act, we're leaving the Human Rights Convention, and we're sending prisoners to El Salvador. They're going to have kittens. They're going to think we've been taken over by a right old monster. But I would say it needs to be done. And it's interesting, the El Salvador model, because I'm pretty sure that Nabil Bukele, who is the Prime Minister of El Salvador himself, who might be the president, I don't know what the nomenclature is over there, probably the president, himself had offered America the option of sending some of their prisons to these supermax prisons in El Salvador, where they're really cracking down on the cartels and the drugs lords who seem to blight that country. I think 1 in 100 people or something like that in El Salvador ended up in clink, and as a result, the crime has been cut drastically. And he said, we're doing so well, to Donald Trump, if you want to send your most hardened crims over here, we'll take them on. So Nigel Farage has clearly looked at this and said, well, that seems like a good idea, because we've got a lot of prison spaces to build and no time in which to build them. So I think that that's probably, I would imagine, Jason, how things might pan out. But we're a long way away from a general election. And the big question is, are we going to be able to limp to the finish line, get a change of government and start to correct some of the things that blight this country in time? Because 4 years feels like a very, very long time when we're seeing these protests in Epping, headlines again of the sort of criminality that's being perpetrated on our streets, and quite who the perpetrators are when we look at some of those crime statistics by nationality. The UK public has had enough. Whether or not the intimidation of Starmer's crackdown on the post-Southport riots is going to keep the cork in the bottle for much longer, I do not know. Right, we're going to take a short break now. Thank you ever so much to Jason in Wiltshire, who just gave me a call. We've still got an hour more of the show to go. We're going to be focusing back on politics just after the break with a former Labour special advisor to get his read of the political runes. And we're also going to be talking about mental health and the fact that kids are being told being sad isn't a mental health issue. That's after this.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, hello there. Welcome back to the show. This is Alex Phillips with you until 1 o'clock, sitting in for Julie Hartley-Brewer all week this week. So 10 till 1 every single day. Do join me. It's lovely having your company. It's lovely knowing that I am basically in the midst of such wonderful, discerning patriots as you, who tunes into the home of common sense because you want to share your thoughts and feelings and see the world pretty much in exactly the same way that I do. We feel like we're going crazy, don't we? It's all slipping away, that everything is just a bit too messed up. And then we seem to be living under a government who don't seem to listen to the people. That actually, if they had a blueprint for doing the opposite of what we want, that is the one that they are following. They don't seem to be listening. They don't seem to get the things that matter to the British people. Their polling is pretty atrocious, so much so, it seems to me, they want to play about with the way we do elections instead of actually coming up with the policies that are going to make a difference and garner our support. Instead, they want to seem to change the rules of the game. That doesn't seem fair or democratic. And certainly broadcasting here in Talk Towers, the home of common sense, a lot of the guests coming on are just saying, wow, you know, things are getting really bad and we've still got 4 years to go. Nigel Farage, in his press conference just then on Law and Order, was asked about Epping Forest and said that he thinks we are getting dangerously close to civil disobedience in this country on a large scale. I mean, God blimey, would you have imagined having this conversation even 5 years ago? Would you? I mean, seriously, be honest with yourself. Until Southport last year, we didn't really get this sense that things were about to boil over, and now it really feels like Nigel Farage could be right, unless something is done and something's done quickly. And yet the things that the Labour Party seems to be focusing on are not the things that are going to garner them much support from the average Joe. Including, and this is an interesting story today in the Telegraph, coming up with an Islamophobia law, which, according to JL pollsters, are asking people about how they feel about this particular policy being put in place. A survey of 2,000 people has found that Labour will poll significantly worse among voters who are told about the Islamophobia plan. Well, let's speak to former Labour Special Advisor Paul Richards. Good afternoon to you, Paul.
Hi there, Alex. How are you?
Why, when we know, there's this poll in the Telegraph, a survey of 2,000 people, which is a decent enough sample size, one would think. And it's found out that the idea of bringing in an official definition of Islamophobia upsets people so much that Labour could hand reform a 100-seat majority. Why are they pressing ahead with this then?
Well, first of all, it's a snapshot, not a predictor of the future, because the opinion poll was taken before we've even seen any text from this working group. Second thing to stress is that it is just a working group. It's chaired by former Conservative Cabinet Minister Dominic Grieve, and is going to come up with a set of words which then the Secretary of State, Angela Rayner, will consider. So it's not a new law or anything like that. And I suppose the rationale for it is that lots of Muslim people would tell you that they do face discrimination, sometimes violence, but sometimes subtle discrimination, like not getting a job because of their surname or being, muttered at in the street or whatever it might be. And so if there is a problem, then that needs fixing. We do have a definition, for example, on anti-Semitism, which is a helpful way for public bodies to stop such hatreds being manifest. So that's why it's being done.
People would say in return, come on, we're in an era now that we know that there was the grooming gang scandal hushed up because people worried about community relations. We know that specific crime statistics are not put out in the public domain because of the overrepresentation of certain nationalities or certain cultures. And we all know what the common denominator can often be, whether it comes to terror attacks, whether it comes to the raping and grooming of young white girls. The British public aren't stupid. And I think a lot of the people in the British public feel like they're being gagged as a result of this. Well, surely we've got laws in place that mean you cannot harass people, you cannot discriminate against people, you cannot bully people, intimidate people, attack people. We don't have Christianophobia laws. People can say what they like about people who go to church and love a bit of Jesus Christ. That doesn't matter. People who preach in the Bible often get turned off the streets by the cops in this day and age. This is going to go down like a cold bucket of sick amongst the Red Wall voters.
Well, if I was advising Angela Rayner right now, I'd say two things. One is it has to be seen to be utterly fair. There can be no two-tier justice or even a whiff of it. So you can't treat people differently regardless to their faith. And second of all, it can't curtail freedom of speech. So if people want to critique other people's religions, then of course we don't have blasphemy laws in this country, and nor should we. So if I want to say that I don't believe in angels, or I don't believe in winged horses or miracles or anything of that kind, then I should have the freedom to say so, and other people can have their own faiths interrogated in that way. And as long as it does those two things, then it actually helps fix a problem. And I think that's legit. But don't forget, it's only a working party. The government's not actually going to necessarily do this. We won't know what it says till September.
I can't understand.
We don't even know.
Yeah, no, I know. And look, I know Dominic Grieve is the one chairing this. I'm hardly like his #1 super fan.
No, but he's an intelligent chap, whether we agree with him or not, and he's going to take a very rational view to this. I mean, it's not some Labour. It's a rational thing to do.
How do you have a phobia law of a certain religion without that curtailing free speech? That's what I don't understand. You either have free speech where you can say what you like about Islam and how freaked out you might be by some of its practices, or you can't. I don't see how can you have this middle ground?
Well, it mustn't stray into blasphemy laws. I completely agree with that. And I don't think the government's got any intention of doing that anyway. We should all be free to critique any aspect of religious or other faith. And so, that's part of our sort of freedoms, really, as citizens. But, where people are not getting a job because their surname is Ali or whatever it might be.
But how do they know they didn't get a job because their surname's Ali? Because they all just come up and say, that's why I didn't get it. If there was a sort of blondophobia law and I didn't get a job, I'd turn and say, oh, is it because I'm blonde? I think it must be because I'm blonde. It's very hard, isn't it? But this is what happens. People then use that as a stick, the victimhood stick, to get their own way.
Well, that's why whatever they come up with, this definition does need to be practical and realistic and fair and fit in with British values. There's no harm in that at all. But like I say, we do have one for anti-Semitism, and that is quite an effective set of words with examples, which then public bodies can then use as a yardstick on what is and what isn't anti-Semitic. And, we had a big row in the Labour Party about this about 2.5 years ago, where people were trying to resist that. But by adopting it, lots of public bodies say it's quite helpful. So the idea is something not dissimilar, but like I say, never straying into the realms of a blasphemy law, because we do have religious both toleration and freedom in this country, and we should be allowed to critique each other's religions freely. But, people are getting attacked in the street, Alex. People are getting their business windows put through. People are getting genuine threats. The attacks because people are visibly Muslim are going up.
But little girls also been snatched off the street by Muslim rape gangs. I mean,
That's why the Baroness Casey report, which you've debated on this show, I know, is so important, because it did say that some of the justice was then not being done properly because of a fear of saying the wrong thing and being branded as Islamophobe. And so, when this definition comes out, it needs to take that into account, that we do need freedom to critique and to call things out without fear of this, which is why having a clear definition would actually probably be helpful, and in retrospect would have been very helpful, as Louise Casey points out, when some of these absolutely egregious miscarriages of justice and cover-ups were being done.
I want to play a clip now, because Nigel Farage has just done his big press conference on law and order, and part of that press conference he was asked about the protests in Epping Forest. So let's have a look.
On Epping, I don't think anybody in London even understands just how close we are to civil disobedience on a vast scale in this country, and I regret saying that. Of course, there were some bad eggs that turned up at Epping. There were the usual far-right thugs. But equally, what about Antifa? Why are Antifa allowed to go to these demonstrations, to wear balaclavas, to not be identified, to do gestures last night of them shooting at members of the public? Why are Antifa allowed to turn up outside a meeting I do in Cornwall 3 months ago, to assault members of the public, come into a democratic meeting? So, it isn't all far-right thuggery, as you might sometimes hear from our Prime Minister. But do I understand? You bet your life I do. You bet your life I do. I'm sitting on my table with two mothers. Don't underestimate the simmering anger and disgust that there is in this country that we are letting in every week, in fact some days, many hundreds of undocumented young males, many of whom come from cultures in which women and young girls are not even treated as second-class citizens. So the answer is yes, I do understand the genuine upset and anger. And I'll bet you that most of the people outside that hotel in Epping weren't far right or far left or anything like that. They were just genuinely concerned families.
Well, there you go, Paul Richards. He says he understands. I mean, actually, as you no doubt are aware, I worked with Nigel for a long time. He phoned me up the other day and he said to me, Alex, you've got this right from the beginning when it comes to women's safety and integration and men from other cultures. He said, you've been talking about this a long time, Alex, and you are right. The public are fed up. But does the Labour Party seem to understand this? Because I'm sitting there waiting for the Prime Minister to talk about these issues, waiting to feel like people like me deserve to be listened to, and I say that I don't feel safe walking around the streets of London where I live. But I'm not hearing anything. Instead, what I do hear is what Nigel Farage has alluded to, which is every time you try and make a point on this, you get far-right thugs, which is the label attached to all of us. Do you remember after Southport when that hashtag I'm a far-right thug trended on social media because people said, well, look, I actually feel the same way as some of these protesters. And instead I get things like, well, we're going to have an Islamophobia law instead, and I want to pull my hair out. I want to scream and shout because I feel like I'm not welcome in my own country, that I'm not listened to, that women and girls like me are being thrown under the bus, sacrificed at the altar of political correctness, that we don't matter and we have got no recourse to being heard. That's how I feel. That's how a lot of women listening to this show feel. Why on earth are people like Sir Keir Starmer not addressing that if Nigel Farage is?
Well, the first thing, Alex, you're a national broadcaster, so you've got an important platform and you do get your say. So I wouldn't say that about yourself. Now, on the hotel issue, the Labour government is closing down these hotels because they are flashpoints and they are unsuitable for large numbers of young men to be in town centres. And I live in a town that has had a few of these hotels and they've been closed and people have been dispersed. So I think that's the right policy from that point of view. Farage's language, I think, is going to have to be interrogated very closely. I think people will have to look very closely at what he was saying in that, because some of it sounded borderline incitement to me. I'm not a lawyer, but I would like a lawyer to look at it.
Okay, so what? Hold on. I mean, look, this is quite chilling. You now want a lawyer to look at what Nigel Farage has said in the press conference.
Well, they will be anyway. I mean, that's not why I want it. I mean, that's what's going to be happening, because I think some of the language strayed dangerously close to the suggestion that people should go out and riot. I don't know. Let's have a look at. Let's pick over the words and see what he said.
That's crazy. I don't think he said people should go out and riot. I said he thinks that he understands why people are so upset and there are simmering tensions. I think he's warning us against it.
Flying very close to the wind. And like I say, I would like to review in the cold light of day the actual remarks he made, because I think he may regret them in the cold light of day.
You are astonishing me right now, Paul. You're the one who's scaring me, wanting to get a lawyer to crawl over the words of a politician at a press conference talking about how close the general public are to losing their minds because they're worried, and you want to drag him to a court instead of dealing with the issue?
I think that that section of his press conference was obviously unscripted. It wasn't the message that he was there to talk about. He was taken there by a journalistic question, and I think in the cold light of the day, what he said may well look inflammatory, and I have to look at it again.
This is what really worries me. This is what really worries me, Paul, which is I think that there are a lot of people out there, and he said people in London don't seem to get what the rest of the country is feeling like, and I think that's kind of what's going on here, because people are very upset and very worried about what they're seeing happening in their communities. They've not been given any democratic recourse at the ballot box to feel like they're being listened to. We're not seeing the numbers come down. We're seeing these people, yes, they might be dispersed from hotels, but they're getting, top of the list for housing when people in Britain can't get social housing. I'm not sure dispersing all of these young men from foreign countries within the communities is going to make matters better or worse, quite frankly. And I'm worried that nothing's being spoken about, which is why we feel like we've got this massive barrel that's about to overflow, and all we get is a little thimbleful out every day, and yet a jug load gets added to it. And I think that he might have a point, that there's very simmering tensions in the UK. And actually, this idea that he, in saying that, is inciting something, this is half the problem. It seems to me the reflex of the left and Sir Keir Starmer is to try and smack down on free speech, intimidate people to not talk about the problem, make them feel like they're the problem for even thinking certain thoughts or having witnessed certain things going on in their neighbourhoods, and are gaslighting them that there's nothing to see here, nothing wrong. And if you dare have a sense that there is, you are the person who needs to be dealt with. That chills me to the bone, Paul.
I think public figures do have a responsibility, and they have to choose their words with care, and they have to be absolutely certain that they're not being misinterpreted when they talk about these very difficult issues, because it is a hot summer coming up and people do feel aggrieved. And we've seen rioting. You said you've never seen rioting like this before. We've had riots in this country most decades forever, and there are flashpoints when summer comes around, and people just have to be responsible. And what I'm calling out here, Alex, is that I don't think some of that language was very responsible.
But what language? I don't understand, because I didn't hear anything wrong with it.
He's a man who, is talking about becoming our prime minister, and I don't think some of the language was very prime ministerial at all.
But what language? What are we talking about? Because I couldn't pick out a single thing. He said, "Why should Antifa be allowed to come in?"
What is Antifa? What is that? We don't have that in this country.
Of course we have Antifa in this country. You see people with Antifa stickers and Antifa banners.
This is an American import. He's using the Trumpian language about something that doesn't exist in the UK. And who was he talking about there? Antifa. What is that?
We actually had Essex Police themselves talk about extreme left protesters coming and infiltrating the protests of the ordinary citizens of Epping Forest, and extreme elements from both sides, hooligans and on the left wing, the counter demonstrators who wanted to flare up tensions even more. Essex Police put out a press release over the course of the weekend saying that.
Well, that's right.
Essex
Police were being attacked. The coppers were attacked during these so-called peaceful demonstrations, which is why I return to my point. The language we use in the public discourse, and especially...
Well, he echoed the language of Sir Keir Starmer, didn't he? He actually echoed the words of the Prime Minister. He echoed the words of the Prime Minister and said there were some far-right thugs there. He actually used, a page out of Sir Keir Starmer's own copybook. But he said, as well as there being hooligans on one extreme, there were people on the other extreme. And if anything, he was saying that needs to stop. These people can't infiltrate these protests. I think he's almost saying what you would want him to say, but for some reason...
Well, you're right, actually. I completely agree with that. There shouldn't be infiltrators or agent provocateur on either side, because we don't want a summer of violence, do we? And I think that's why we have to be careful with the language we use.
Do you think the Labour Party are going to try and do this thing again, where they perpetrated the hashtag Farage riots, despite the fact the man was in Hong Kong and nothing to do with people who gathered together in demonstrations after Southport? Is that what Labour's tactic are going to be?
Well, our tactic is to have security on the streets. So I think if there was any hint of public disorder, then obviously the police local operational plan is to retain order and arrest people if necessary. And that doesn't matter who you are, and it certainly doesn't matter whether you're left or right. We've had lots of people on the Palestine demonstrations arrested over the last few weekends, haven't we? So, the police are there to maintain order, which is why public figures have to be careful what they say, because we do not want disorder on the streets.
Very fascinating a chat with you, Paul. Really thankful for you coming on the programme today. Although I'm slightly reeling at the idea that you might want a lawyer going over Nigel's speech to see if he incited violence. What on earth? That's the sound of a pen dropping. That's how astonished I was. Right, we're going to take a short break now, but when I come back, we're going to be joined by Migrant Sentinel Nathan, activist and commentator, to talk about lots of things going on in the news today, because it's suddenly become a very busy day, hasn't it? Take a breather, get a cuppa, and see me on the other side.
press were incorrectly reporting us on Friday morning after our protest on Thursday. And so we just wanted to make it really clear that we're strong women, we're mums, we're sisters, we're aunties, we're parents of the area. So we're just here to support.
How could you brand her as, like, I don't know, far right or racist or xenophobic or anything? She's literally just saying we want safety, we want to have our country back.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello there, welcome back to the show. I've got to catch my breath after that interview. I mean, is this... have we just seen what is to come in the future here? You know, sometimes something happens and you think, oh, that's what they're going to do. That's what they're going to do. Am I potentially right in thinking that actually last summer, I don't know if you remember this, but last summer, after there were protests in Southport, which then ricocheted into big riots because they were infiltrated by extreme elements, as we're seeing potentially happening in Epping Forest, that the left wing's favourite attack dog started calling them the Farage riots. Because Nigel Farage had the audacity to turn around and go, look, the general public need to be told what's going on. The vacuum within which this gaslighting is taking place is making matters worse. And he said, we're not being told the truth here. And you know what? Time proved him right, didn't it? It proved him right. We weren't told who the perpetrator of that disgusting atrocity was. It was kept hidden from the public, and yet they knew, didn't they? They'd have had a Cobra meeting if they discovered that ricin in the property of Axel Rudakabana and the Al-Qaeda manual. But we were told that it wasn't that at all, that we were wrong, we were far-right thugs, and we were oppressed, intimidated. Political prisoners, Lucy Connolly still in prison to this day. To this day. And then what happened was there was a trending hashtag on social media, and it takes a lot to get hashtags trending, may I just say. Some things happen organically because it's a massive event like a World Cup final. Other things happen because there is a concerted effort to make them trend. And I remember during the Southport riots, hashtag Farage riots trended. Started off with James O'Brien saying it, and next thing it's everywhere. And even the stupid, lazy legacy media started saying to Nigel, it's your fault, you said this, you put a video out saying the public weren't told what was going on. Well, they weren't told what was going on, and then he got blamed for it. The man was visiting his new grandson in Hong Kong, for crying out loud. And then I just got a sense that they're going to do it again, aren't they? They're going to do it again. If there's any sort of disturbance now, because there's one more migrant attack on a little girl or whatever it may be, or a terror arrest or, you know, whatever, that they're going to blame him for insurrection and incitement. I just have a feeling now that they're going to go down that route again, and it makes me, I don't know, I just feel chilled to the bone that we live in a country that wants to oppress free speech that much and not actually deal with things that are going on that are so frightening and so scary for the average mum and dad. Anyway, let's catch up now with a good friend of mine, Myron, Senator Nathan, activist and commentator on this, but also on another story in the press, which sounds relatively helpful, that little kids are going to be taught that feeling sad is not a mental health issue, it's the ups and downs of life. Don't keep trying to find some acronym. I've got ADHD, OCD, whatever it may be. I need drugs, I need sick leave, I need time off school. You know, sometimes not talking about your mental health is the best way to not go mad. But let's start off, Myron. I don't know if you were able to see some of the clips from that press conference and the interview I just did. I want to get your reaction to that.
Well, I think your concerns are really quite well placed, but Nigel isn't actually leading this discussion when he's talking about civil disobedience. So you've got Professor David Betts, who really flagged it up some time ago. He's a professor of war studies. He's an academic. He's certainly not a far-right academic. And he was outlining very systematically how a society ends up going down this route. And he was saying that this is where we're eventually going. We've seen riots in Ireland over migrant hotels and immigration. We've even had Lisa Nandy, the culture secretary, pointing out there are certain parts of the north of England that are a tinderbox waiting to catch flames. And so Nigel isn't stoking anything. He's simply observing. And it's so refreshing to hear a party leader actually voice the concerns and the exasperation of the nation. Because if he doesn't do it, what's going to happen is people are going to lose hope, and that's going to further push the open window into violence. And that's what no one wants to see. That. I mean, Keir Starmer's tactic is to simply say, don't turn the other way, look the other way, and eventually when things do kick off, go into two-tier Keir mode and then target people like Lucy Connolly, label people far right, and eventually you have people like even political prisoners like Peter Lynch and so on committing suicide in prison. That's his tactic. Nigel is flagging it up, bringing it to the surface so we can look at it and deal with it head on. That's what should be done. That's responsibility.
That is responsibility, and that's what we need to do. I think dispersing migrants from hotels into private accommodation is going to make things even worse. I think it's actually going to be not a cure to the problem at all, but an exacerbating factor, personally. I just cannot see how, a little private residence with 6 men in who aren't technically working but probably are in the black market, who otherwise might be sitting there and doing Lord knows what. I mean, when that's literally, it's one thing when it's a hotel on the outskirts of a town. It's another thing when it's the house next door to your own and you've got little kids. Blooming scary indeed. Let's talk about this story, which is pupils are going to be told that feeling low is not a mental health issue. That revised relationship, sex and health education, RSHE as it's called, the guidance issued to schools, is instructing teachers not to encourage self-diagnosis of conditions such as depression or anxiety. I mean, this is the thing. So many young people walk around going, I'm depressed, I'm anxious, I can't do it, my mental health, I'm triggered, I need a safe space. And actually, it's almost psychosomatic, isn't it? If you sit there and think, I feel really sad over and over again, guess what? You're gonna feel sad. Whereas in life, what I find, if you walk down the street and smile at someone and they smile back, it massively brightens your day. If you send a good morning text message to your loved one going, I love you to the ends of the earth and want to snuggle you up until your brain pops out of your eyeball sockets, and give that joy, it makes you feel joyful. And that actually, this is sort of 101 on how not to go bonkers, which is think positively. I remember good old positive mental attitude, PMA, where did that go? And actually stop over-diagnosing and over-obsessing and over-introspecting. Thank goodness someone suddenly remembered how to do this stuff and is going to tell school kids.
Yeah, well, Bridget Phillips is probably one of the most spiteful politicians in the chamber, I think. And she's kind of like a pseudo-Marxist. But I will tip my hat to her and say to her, this is a good venture, because we have, it's gone way too far, the nature of mental health, the over-diagnosis. We're in a situation where we need to change the whole culture of what mental health is. I would teach Stoicism, Stoic philosophy. You have people like Seneca, the ancient, Stoics, who basically talk about the fantasy of your mind. It gives you far more suffering than the actual reality itself. And we need to train students, train pupils to understand, to get control of themselves and mastery of their own mind and their own thoughts and their own thinking. And this is a war against the dopamine hits of the mobile phone, really. And Jonathan Haidt talks about this quite a lot when he talks about the great rewiring of the child's mind when they have a mobile phone. The constant dopamine hits of social media and the pressures of social media eventually desensitize you to reality itself. And as a result of that, reality becomes depressing. It doesn't hit the pleasure centers in you. It doesn't give you happiness. And what we need to teach children is to put the mobile phone down and actually engage with life. I remember when I had a receptionist who's in her early 20s. We had a little dispute, but she was smiling with me and everything else. And then when she went home, she gave me this barrage on the mobile phone, and it made me realise, I just saw you 5 minutes ago, and you didn't say anything. But on the phone, you're engaging with me, and that's where children are heading towards. They're much more comfortable on the screen, on the mobile phone, but human interaction and actually engaging with life, engaging with reality, they don't know how to do it anymore.
What do you make of this, or whether this is the engagement with reality that can help our mental health? Because apparently some patients in surgeries across Gloucestershire are going to be offered social prescribing to cure depression, such as giving tickets to football matches or comedy nights, or being prescribed activities such as comedy and gardening. I mean, I like the gist of this. I'm a big believer in get out of your house, get off the phone, go and mix with ordinary people, go to see a sports club, go and join a local activity where you get to know people and actually speak and interact and mingle. So many of us work from home and just live in doom loops or echo chambers. So the sentiments I agree with, but it seems a bit funny that doctors are going to actually prescribe it.
Yeah, I mean, if it gets you off antidepressants, you can give it a bit of a tick and welcome it. But the idea that a doctor prescribes you to go and see a football match, I mean, that's really, really strange stuff. And what this is trying to do is combat, effectively, loneliness. I mean, we have an island of strangers, I mean, Keir Starmer's words. We have phones, we have Netflix. And so that does make us feel more isolated. And so but we need a kind of common sense approach, but I'm not sure a top-down breastfeeding by the state sort of approach is the way to actually deal with this situation. But understand, this is a crisis of meaning in society, and this is a crisis of the church. I actually think this is the church's responsibility to step in and provide meaning and purpose for the nation. Preach the gospel. That's what I say. I say that as a non-Christian, preach the gospel.
Here, I couldn't agree more. It's interesting, actually, so many news stories coming out at the moment for record church attendances. Something is happening out there, Myra, and people tend to agree with both of us and think that perhaps we should let go and let God instead. That's the wonderful Myron sent on Athan there, giving us his views on some of the big stories of the day. Astonishing stories today, I must admit. And this is an extra astonishing story coming up after the break, because good old Great British Energy, you know, that sort of Ed Zero's new department costing billions of pounds for renewables, solar panels and windmills and all the rest of it. They've obviously been buying all their kit from China, where it's really cheap to make and sell, and they also dominate all the rare earths they need to have those sorts of production lines. And they've been using slaves. Of course they have. So can Labour afford to buy British instead? Let's speak to Ross Clark after this break.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, hello there. It's got a bit funny towards the end of this show, hasn't it? Funny indeed. I still can't quite get over that interview with former Labour advisor who was saying that Nigel Farage's press conference could be incitement. Huh? This stuff really freaks me out. Let's speak to a caller. Steve in Scunthorpe. Hello there, Steve.
Oh, how are you? Yeah, I think, I don't want Nigel Farage to speak like a minister, because what do Prime Ministers do? Or the one we got at the moment, lie through their back teeth. And what did he say when those three little girls were murdered, when him and his three stooges went and laid flowers?
Yeah.
Absolutely nothing. If Nigel Farage was there, he was our Prime Minister, he'd be there and he'd give words of comfort to people. what he should have done was taken the knee to those little girls, not to a convicted criminal.
Yeah, so I mean,
in America.
Look, I agree. I felt for a long time we've never been spoken to. We've never been told we have every right to feel like we feel. That's half of the problem, right? That we don't feel like we are being listened to. We feel instead like we're being gaslit and told we're the problem for identifying, for seeing with our own eyes what's going on. And yet the powers that be are telling us nothing to see here. They're gaslighting us. You're the problem. You must be a racist if you think that way. You must be far right.
And the way that guy spoke to you about Nigel Farage should be investigated, and I have to trawl through it to see if it's legal. I would, I'm not going to incite violence, but I would get rid of all those lawyers. Enough.
Yeah, I mean, this is what really frightens me.
Taking my money.
It's sort of, I must admit, I remember sitting in this studio during the Southport riots and having a knot in my stomach permanently because you just felt, I might say the wrong thing. I might get my collar felt. I might be charged with something. What if it's me who's next hauled down to the police station? And even if nothing happens, what if I'm kept there for 3 days and being told that, you know, I might have said something on social media or during one of my programmes that is incitement, that is whatever it may be. And it made me feel really quite sick, if I'm honest with you, with anxiety. And I've got it back. I've got that knot in my stomach again, just hearing Paul Richards say that he wants to get lawyers to look through Nigel Farage's press conference and the Q&A to see if he was inciting. It's put that knot of anxiety right back in my stomach where you think, oh my God, this is going to be their play. They're going to do it again. They're going to do it again, aren't they?
That's right. And look what happened to the News of the World. They got closed down, maybe rightfully. But why hasn't the BBC been closed down? How many times has it? Where's this thing about death to the IDF?
Yeah.
Where has that gone? So time and time again, the BBC are a mouthpiece for the left. And the number of people I know, I used to watch Question Time. I used to listen to Jeremy Vine. But I just won't listen to any of it now. It's just all one-sided.
It does feel like we sort of know what the unspoken sort of social conduct clause is, that if you say anything that's concerned about immigration or even a whiff of right-wing, which are the big problems are actually taking place, you're a monster. But you can say anything you like to anyone who thinks that way. It's not right. And it's scary. Steve in Scunthorpe, thank you ever so much. Let's speak now to Andrew, who's in Hertfordshire. Hi there, Andrew.
Hiya. Look, Nigel is the problem. But actually, you can't blame him. What he's doing is he's identifying how awful the situation is.
Right.
Nothing will change until 2029. Got a woman in jail for a tweet. You've got people who are seeing their children and their wives terrified to walk the streets. So people will make the decision to take the law into their own hands. All Nigel's doing is just identifying how bad the law and order is in this country. Yeah. And what's Starmer doing? He's going on holiday. Now, come on. You got the Notting Hill Carnival coming up.
Oh,
you got 7,000 police officers to police 2 million unticketed people. We've got 200 asylum hotels in the country. If people were to take the law in their own hands, there's not enough police to solve it. This is a serious point in the law and order and the safety of this country, and the government's going on holiday.
Yeah, or going to do what they do best, which is to try and instill us all with fear so nobody says or does anything. I kind of understand their reasons, their tactics for all of that, but I don't like it. I also, you know, I sit here now, again, I've got that knot back in my stomach thinking I'm not encouraging anybody to go out and do anything. Just stay at home and listen to me instead. Stay at home, listen to me and vent that way. That's good, isn't it? Because I get to have a national platform and say certain things. Great, I'll do the heavy lifting for you. Don't go out and do anything. But it's really... It is really terrifying, the approach that, and it's not just in the UK, but it seems to be across Europe, the approach that's being taken is completely disregard the concerns of ordinary men and women, shut them down, shut them up, stifle their speech, but then do nothing about the underlying causes of these problems. Andrew, thank you ever so much for your call. I'm going to read some messages now because so many are flooding in. Shirley in the Cotswolds, great part of the country. That interview with Paul is only the start of how opposition politicians here and the EU are going to speak about Nigel Farage and reform. Of course it is. We'll hear these words, incitement, etc., about everything. This is what they're doing in France and other countries. It is totally chilling. Starmer is already using his control to stop us from voting for any other party. I'm feeling very concerned. They're all on the side of the migrants. And simply couldn't give a flying fig about us. I seriously worry about my daughter commuting around London. Yeah, I know, I agree with every word you say there, Shirley. Claire says, totally agree with you, Alex. Your Labour man's attitude is what causes problems. Looking for things that aren't there. I wish I could emigrate. Keep up the good work. OMG, Alex, says Sally. I heard that. I heard what he said. You're right. That's exactly what's going to happen. I'm chilled to the bone. I'm scared, Alex. I'm scared. Don't be silent, says Sally. Well, I'll try not to be. Someone else's message saying that Guy Paul was frankly saying that the loony left had already declared war on the rest of the British people and they're willing to say and do anything to further the destruction of Britain and British culture. Paul Richards' comments, says Dave in Southport. If he thought he picked up on something Nigel said, why didn't he say what it was? If he needs someone to go over the words, then so must the public. People like him are part of the problem, says Dave in Southport. You're right. If he says, I think Nigel incited violence, well, what did he say? I don't know. I'm going to have to look. Well, it can't be inciting violence. You can't sort of incite violence through some sort of cryptic code that no one actually picked up on what you're instructing them to do. And I like Paul Richards. Normally, he comes on, give us his two-bit from the other side, which is very important in balance. And we've agreed on lots of things. But I wonder if there's been a sort of memo to the wider commentariat on the left, the influencers of the Labour Party, to now start talking in this manner. I don't know, maybe not. But I wouldn't be surprised if there was going to be a tactic to try and demonise Nigel for incitement. Alex, like you, I'm astonished at Paul Richards' comments about Nigel Farage. People like him are part of the problem. Surely they can see what's happening, but just choose to pull the wool over their own eyes. Nigel says what people think because he's in touch with them and he's not pandering to left-wing lunacy, which has permeated the government and its institutions. Thus says Richard in Sheffield. What's that guy for real? Says Gary in Halifax. Antifa has been active in the UK for years. It's nothing to do with Trump. And it put him up for nominee for Plank of the Week. Very good. Right, OK, let's take a short break now. And as promised, after the break, we're going to be talking about the slaves of China making all our wimwoms. That's after this.
They're being put in 4-star hotels, 3 meals a day, pocket money, free medical care, free dental care, and a chance to work illegally at the same time. I could see what was going to happen. So I was way ahead on all of this.
But they won't have had the most delicious piece of sea bass I have ever had when I came to your place and you cooked it for me.
Well, I'm a sea angler, have been all my life.
UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, hello there. Welcome back to the final bit of the programme. And we're all getting rather hot in the collar. Certainly stuffy in this studio today. I think the air conditioning's given up the ghost. Oh, I'm sweating, I tell you. But a hot day means good news for solar panels. Surely that means we can get a load of electricity into our grid. Oh, it's not going to go all funny like it did in Spain. No, that could never happen here. Problem is, of course, while we may have the odd sunny day that can generate a bit of electricity from a solar panel, is where we're getting those solar panels from, because a great number of them are being made in China. This so-called green revolution that's supposed to create 48,000 jobs or whatever it is, well, it might do. Well, if you want to call them jobs, I wouldn't call them jobs, I'd call them slave labour. But all of the work to build these blimmin' things, windfarms and solar panels, are taking place in China. And we know that they're these big manufacturers in some of the provinces of China where they're using Uyghurs as slave labour. Well, that's OK, because the Labour MP Sarah Champion has come up with a solution. She said that instead GB Energy should be buying solar panels from companies in the UK. My question is, however, how? We haven't got the ability to manufacture anything here because our energy bills are so big. Because the tax on employers' national insurance. Because we haven't got access to the resources. We barely even have a steel industry. How are we supposed to be churning out solar panels en masse all of a sudden? Well, let's speak to Ross Clark, author of Not Zero, How an Irrational Target Will Impoverish You, Help China and Won't Even Save the Planet. This is the thing, Ross, isn't it? I mean, Beijing is loving this. They're getting a massive, giant charity cheque from us, quarter on quarter on quarter. They use slaves, build coal-fired power stations. They're fine. They've looked after their own needs. They control all the rare earth minerals, and they're just taking us for fools. But I don't see how we quite get out of this bind, because I don't think we can afford to manufacture solar panels ourselves in a way that the government coffers are going to stretch to be able to meet the cost.
Yes, well, this is the problem. If you want to try to clean up Britain's energy industry by using solar energy, the solar panels almost certainly going to come from China, a large number of them. China manufactures 80% of the world's solar panels, and even those, the remaining 20%, which are made around the world, many of those use a raw material called polysilicon, which itself is made in China. And not just made in China, but it's made in these factories in the Uyghur region, where a report by Sheffield Hallam University 4 years ago sort of implicated the use of forced labour in the manufacture of those of that polysilicon. And I say that's, that is to be found in the supply chain to solar panel manufacturers all around the world. There is another problem, of course, which a lot of the Chinese-made solar panels are made with coal-powered energy, coal-powered electricity, which China still generates 60% of its electricity from coal, just about the dirtiest form of power. And but of course, when it comes to constructing, adding up Britain's carbon emissions, all that doesn't count on UK carbon emissions, because it counts on Chinese emissions. We own, for the purposes of the net zero target, we only count what are called territorial emissions, carbon emissions physically spewed out within Britain. So we might think we're cleaning up our electricity, but we're not quite doing it as much as...
Well, yeah, this idea that CO2 sort of has its own little national boundaries in the Earth's atmosphere and goes, oh, well, I was produced by China, I better just hover around above China, it is absolutely mad. But I can't see any way that we can hit any sort of net zero target, even though I don't think we should, without using countries such as China, because how on earth are we supposed to start making this stuff in Britain?
Yeah, I mean, I understand there are one or two small manufacturers of solar panels in Britain, but as you say, they're hampered by very high energy costs, high labour costs, and just like all other manufacturing industry, it costs very much more to make goods in Britain than it does in Southeast Asia. So, you know, if we're going to try to stipulate that only UK solar panels may be used for the sort of GB energy and so on, well, it's going to cost a lot more, and we're already paying quite a lot for our power. I don't think consumers will take kindly to the idea of paying even more.
No, I don't think they can even afford to, quite frankly. The highest energy bills in the world already. And is it about 40% of bills that are subsidies for net zero now?
Not quite. No, it's a bit less than that. But yeah, there are the social and environmental costs do make quite a proportion of UK energy bills, electricity bills in particular, and a bit on the gas bills as well. Yes, there are sort of hidden subsidies, a lot of hidden subsidies. They're not. Ofgem very kindly used to break down our bills on its website, tell us exactly how much we were paying, and then mysteriously a couple of years ago that data sort of disappeared off the Ofgem website and made it harder for people to find out. And you have to wonder why didn't they want us to know?
But the other thing is, I read an interesting report into the nature of the wind farms in this country and the fact that big entitled landowners have already got millions of pounds, are making millions more by having turbines put on their land, which we, the public, essentially are paying for. It's almost like a reverse Robin Hood. They're stealing from the poor to pay the rich.
Yes, well, that seems to be the way with green energy, isn't it? All the subsidies go to very wealthy people. The grants go to wealthy people. Those can afford electric cars and solar panels and heat pumps and so on. And it's the ordinary people who pay the price. You know, as I say, it's you know, a lot of these subsidies are funded by levies on our bills, which are a regressive form of tax. You know, if it came out of general taxation, well, you'd say, well, you know, it was funded by progressive taxation. But if you put a levy on people's bills, then proportionally the poor are paying more. So, you know, it might sort of allow the government to say it's spending a bit less on subsidies than we really are paying, but putting it on our bills is not helping the poor pay their energy bills.
I mean, 4 more years of the Labour Party, they don't seem like they're going to slow up on the net zero stuff at all. If anything, they're going to go full throttle on it into oblivion. What do you think could come to pass in those 4 years as we continue to hurtle down this path?
Well, Ed Miliband has promised to save us £300 a year on our electricity bills, hasn't he, if you remember? Well, I don't think that one's going to go very well. Obviously, nobody can predict what energy prices are going to be like in 4 years' time, but Miliband has committed himself somewhat of a hostage to fortune by making that promise. I think in the next 4 years our bills will probably go up. We will also be risking power cuts, as has happened in Spain earlier this year, because of the sort of intermittent nature of wind and solar power. And you know, I think if we get into that situation, then public opinion on all this stuff is going to turn very negative very quickly.
I think you're right. The brilliant Ross Clark, ever good on these things. Hello, Mr. Collins.
Has the
He's not plugged in yet, but you know, I've just got an interesting.
You did catch me very much by surprise.
I know.
I hardly sat down.
I've an interesting bit of copy here. So Nigel Farage has just done his big press conference on law and order. And get this, he has said that the Albanian Prime Minister, Edi Rama, has agreed to take back all Albanian prisoners from Britain. He said that he's been in conversation with Edi Rama and he's happy to have an agreement to deport foreign criminals. Well, the last time some sort of agreement with Edi Rama happened, there was that joint press conference with Sir Keir Starmer, and when there's supposed to be the migrant processing centres. And in the live press conference, Edi Rama said, I didn't agree to anything. I've offered that to Italy. I ain't going to offer it to you, sunshine.
What's talking about, mate?
So let's see if Edi Rama comes out and goes, yes, I would. I'm totally for this. And if he has, 1-0 to Farage, right?
Absolutely.
Did you see that press conference?
I did. I was watching and listening to it. To be honest, I thought my takeaway from that, there's loads on crime, and, are Reform UK going to be the party of crime? Can they achieve what he set out to do? It's all, I just want to hear politicians. You don't hear politicians with those aspirations.
Yes.
That's the thing, you just don't hear it.
Well, it's interesting, isn't it? Because what the other parties have come out and said is, oh, that's all very well, he can't do it. How's it going to be afforded? Because all you ever hear from politicians is, it's difficult. Oh, we don't know how to do it. There's not enough money.
You really can do
the
it.
legislation. And I'm like, your job is to sort it out. It's
100%.
not good enough to say
Look,
it can't
we know,
be done.
I've said this before, we know if they really want to do something big, like, for example, close down an entire country, they can do that. They can close down institutions, jobs, businesses, individuals' lives. Nothing is bigger than that. If you can do that, you can do anything.
What do you make of what Nigel was saying in the Q&A afterwards about Epping Forest, where he said, I think we are very, very close to sort of large-scale civil disobedience?
Well, that's exactly what we're going to focus on, that, because I thought that was the most telling line out of this. And it's not, obviously what's been happening outside hotels and things is a catalyst, but it's bigger than that, isn't it? If you get into everything about the way our institutions are run, whether it's DEI, like crazy gender stuff, the list goes on. And that sense that we're living in this sort of upside-down, topsy-turvy world, black is white, night is day, up is down. It's like, it's completely, what's going on? And people are sensing that. There's a real sense of something's not right here. There's a choice of doing the right thing, and our governments and institutions just go, I know what we'll do. We'll do the wrong thing.
What do you make of the migrants being put into, these asylum seekers, irregular migrants, being put into houses? Because I think that's going to be worse than the hotels.
Yeah, but I 100% agree. And the interesting thing about that, Labour thought this was a great idea. I tell you, don't worry, we're going to close the hotels. Oh, brilliant. Well, what are you going to do with everybody?
They're going down your street. They're going to be your next door neighbour.
We're just going to put them in houses. It's like, no.